Okay. Ready? Should we ready? Should we go? Call the meeting to order. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please. Roll call, please.
Mr. Chairman,
Here.
Vice Chairman Hamilton.
Here.
Member Profit.
Here.
Board Member Renner. It's not on the line yet. Board Member Ruge.
Here.
Board Member Walker.
Here.
Mr. Walsh is on his way, and Mr. Smaby, our CBO.
How about the two absentees? Are they online?
Mr. McKee will be on the phone as well.
Okay. Okay. We have the next item is the approval of the 8/26/2020 meeting minutes. If you read that, I entertain a motion.
I move that we accept the minutes from the meeting of 8/26/2020.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a motion and we have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion carries. Okay. Okay, I guess what we discussed with the Director Walsh is for you to start on the meeting in terms of like going over the, presentation that you have.
Chairman, yes, we can start on that. We also had on the agenda for election of officers, if you want to withhold that until your other two members are present.
Sure,
On the
that'll be
line,
fine.
that's fine. So we can go forward with the presentation if you wish.
I'll get you order that, okay.
Okay.
So is there for the election of the officers? Keith, you want to know anything?
What's that?
For the election of the officers?
I'll make a motion for Mehdi Zarmi to be chairman.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Do we have a second, or?
I would second
Oh, second, no, sorry. Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
I'd also make a motion to appoint Richard Hamilton as vice chair.
I second that. We have a first and we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Motion carries. Gilbert?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce Peter Prophet. He's one of your new board members, first time with us today.
Well, Pete is known in the community for quite some time, so it's not much of an introduction.
Just wanted to welcome you aboard.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, third item on the agenda is the possible adoption of the 2018 building codes. On November 16th, 2020, the Mojave County Board of Supervisors directed the building division staff to begin the process for review and adoption of the 2018 building codes. The process would include public input and staff recommendations presented to the Building Code Advisory Board at this workshop meeting. Public meetings have been held in the Beaver Dam, Colorado City, Kingman, Lake Havasu City, and Bullhead City areas. Questions and comments from those meetings have been compiled and are included in your packet. Also included in this packet is the Board of Supervisors action agenda with supporting materials, the presentation and handouts provided at the public meetings, including relevant changes and proposed amendments, and also ISO building code effectiveness grading schedule information. Following the workshop, staff will make recommendations, any recommended revisions to the draft ordinance and prepare it for final review back to the Building Code Advisory Board on their next meeting scheduled for March 3rd, 2021. The Building Code Advisory Board recommendations will then be presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission for their approval at their meeting scheduled for April 14th, 2021. And the Planning and Zoning Commission recommendations will then be presented to the Mojave County Board of Supervisors at their meeting scheduled for May 3rd, 2021. And with that, a little background, we can go into the PowerPoint presentation. Thank you, Sam. Okay, as we discussed, the board has directed us to conduct the public meetings and also bring this workshop meeting before the Building Code Advisory Committee. So kind of question is, comes down to what are the building codes? You know, the international codes we were under the Uniform Building Codes back in, prior to 2000. The building codes we have now are the I codes. They basically specify minimum construction and legal requirements. They specify structural integrity, specify construction materials, provide fire protection requirements, provide consistent standards, safeguard health, safety, and welfare of building occupants, and are a recognized code throughout the United States and even globally. Typically, the code changes are on a 3-year cycle. Most jurisdictions like ours are looking at a 6-year cycle. So right currently, let me go to the next slide. Currently, we're on the 2012 code. We did not adopt the 2015 code when it came out, and now we're looking at adopting the 2018 code. So that would be a 6-year cycle. Basically, we adopted the 12 code back in 2015 and it became effective for enforcement in 2015. Why should we change codes? Actually, there's certain things with the codes. The adoption of the most current fire codes and building codes have some effects of they achieve lower insurance costs, they lessen damage from fire and structural hazards, they avoid criminal and civil lawsuits, and ensure safety for family and businesses. Another reason to change codes is the State Fire Marshal's Office is transforming to the 2018 code. Also, the Department of Housing has adopted the 2018 code. And by the Fire Marshal's Office adopting that will require compliance with all the fire jurisdictions throughout the state to be on that code. And being on the same code provides a more uniformity across the jurisdictions. And then less conflict between different types of codes. Another reason for going to the code change is the ICC no longer supports the 2012 code. There's no training available, and actually the books aren't available for us. In order for us to improve our education, our training and certification for our plans examiners and inspectors, currently the International Code no longer supports the 12 codes. The inspectors and plans examiners can no longer be trained on the 12 codes, and they've actually been getting certified and trained on the 2018 code. So this last year, we've had 16 additional certifications from our inspectors and our plan reviewers for advanced training, but it was based on the 18 code since we can't train back on the 12 code. Another reason we'd like to go to the codes is neighboring jurisdictions. The city of Kingman is looking at going to the code. The city of Havasu is looking to go to the code. Again, State Fire Marshal's Office and Department of Housing has already gone to the code. We have an IGA with the Wallapai tribe. They have adopted the 2012 code. So the surrounding jurisdictions are going to that code. Some of the benefits, another benefit is we have what's called the Building Code Effectiveness Grading Schedule. This is a grading schedule that's based on the ISO rating, or the insurance office, that basically grades building departments and stuff. So in order to maintain or improve insurance evaluation ratings, Mojave County is currently at a Building Code Effectiveness Grading Schedule rating of 3 for commercial and 4 for residential construction. This is in part due to being on the code, the 2012 code, at the last evaluation. These ratings affect underwriting and insurance rates for new construction. The B6 ratings in turn affects the National Flood Insurance Program and Community Rating System ratings. The county currently holds a CRS rating of 6. This rating directly reflects flood insurance rates, and by adopting the 2018 codes, Mojave County will have a better chance of maintaining these scores and in turn lower insurance rates for the citizens of Mojave County. Also, within the last 10 years, being on the more current codes and having a higher rating within the BSEGS rating and the CRS rating, the county has been able to secure approximately $7 million in the last 10 years for flood control projects and other FEMA-type projects. Going back to that, the rating schedule basically rates well, it basically rates on different things. It rates on the competency of the department, the qualifications that are done, the current code that you're under. And so, again, the ratings, we've been pretty good. If it's within the last 8 years of a code adoption, then we've been told the rates will be going up to basically a residential rate of 9 and a commercial rate of 9 on the BSEGS rating from a 4 and a 3. And then our CS rating would actually jump up to an 8. And what does that mean? Without the county adopting the 18 codes, Mojave County will experience flood insurance increases, approximately 10% for those in the flood zone and 5% for those who have flood insurance outside of flood zone. And Mojave County will also experience a probable reduction in grant funding based on the codes. When will this take place? Again, I iterated that we have we were directed by the board to conduct public meetings. We've had those in all the different areas of the county. We've compiled those comments from those meetings, and those in your booklets today. We can either go through some of those or they're in your book, and we've answered most of the questions on those. With your recommendations, we will compile adoption or amendments for the code or any changes in the code and have those compiled for the next Building Code Advisory meeting to go forward with to the Planning and Zoning Commission. With that, we could go into the significant changes of the codes. And came to our attention, we have a typo, and it was right in the very first sheet. And actually, mine doesn't have it, but yours does. Which sheet was that, Patty? I believe it said the IRS 2018 significant changes. It started out with Chapter 3, occupancy classification and use. If you can see that on your, actually, let me hit the slide. I believe on this sheet on your presentation in your packets, it says IRC significant changes. And that should be, this first page should be IBC, or the International Building Code. So Mr. Hamilton brought that to our attention. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, nice.
It doesn't have it.
I was looking at it.
Okay. So let me say the first IBC significant changes, and again, these are not a complete list of the changes in the code book, but these are ones that staff has recognized that they would be significant to construction, in this case for the commercial or international building code. So the first one on it was mercantile groups. They classified greenhouses as their own occupancy as an agricultural building or something like that, and they've actually came back and redefined that of greenhouses in M groups, which is a mercantile group. This addresses your Walmarts, your Kmarts that have outdoor grow houses or greenhouse areas. So instead of classifying that as a different occupancy in the building code, they basically gave it the same occupancy as the mercantile occupancy. So that's just one change. Accessory storage spaces. They used to have these in an incidental use category where the type of room was classified differently than the rest of the building. So they kind of looked at those and said, why are they different? They don't really have to have any different fire ratings, and so the code people basically just changed it back to say those incidental use areas like a communication room or a compressor room is going to be the same occupancy as the original building. Chapter 5, general building heights and areas. Again, the incidental use table, this is where some of those uses were, construction, or certain occupancies, I'll say like commercial laundry facility rooms, stuff like that. So they've redefined some of that section and made it easier. Obviously, they took some of those out and made those the same occupancies as the other commercial occupancy. Chapter 9, fire protection and life safety systems. In Group A occupancies over 100 occupant level, they did require a manual fire alarm system, or actually they're requiring a manual fire alarm system to be installed above or below level of discharge. This kind of relates to, one of the groups was having restaurants on rooftop high-rise buildings. There wasn't any type of fire alarm system above the level of discharge, so they're requiring a manual fire alarm to be installed. Means of egress, locking arrangements, educational occupancies. This is some of the lockdown facilities that we've seen from some of the shooter incidents. They've actually addressed locking and latches to address some of the locking areas for security. Another one was commonly locked extensions no longer than limited to exterior doors. This is basically over the front door. It used to say this business to be remained open during business hours and not to be locked. They now have utilize this over to interior type exiting doors. So they cannot be locked or have special means of egress, but they do have to be labeled too. So Chapter 16, structural design. The wind loading terminology has been changed again. They changed it from the 6 code and then they changed it in the 12 code. So they're going back to an ultimate and a basic, where it used to be a 3-second gust and a, what was it? Anyway, they just changed the terms, so it didn't change, but just the verbiage. The one major one, though, they did change the wind category and the speeds for our area from a 115 back down to a 95-mile-an-hour wind load. In the 6 code, we used to be under a 90-mile-an-hour 3-second gust. So they've actually reduced quite a bit, and talking with a lot of the steel building manufacturers, it's quite a difference in design of the structure, going from 115 back down to 95. So that's going to help out a lot for engineering. Chapter 29, plumbing. Businesses with less than 75 occupants are now not required to provide separate sex bathrooms. That was required in the 15 code, and they went back down to either a unisex or a single occupant bathroom. And those are the total changes or significant changes for the International Building Code. We're moving on to the International Residential Code. These are significant changes that we saw. Scope and administration, they've actually redefined the maximum height of accessory structures have increased from 3 stories above grade. They used to be 2 stories in grade. So they now allow an extra story in height, basically. Accessory structures are now permitted to be unlimited in area. The 12 code, which we were under, actually had a limitation of 3,000 square feet for a private garage, and then you had to have a 1-hour fire separation between after 3,000 square feet. That caused quite a bit, because it would be a 2-hour firewall in between the two. It kind of co-mixed with the residential code and the building code. So as you'll see too, I think the next one down is they've basically defined the IRC away from the IBC again to try to get them separate codes. So really the IRC will address nothing but residential structures. And that was one change, was there was a limitation in the building code that limited private garages in residential. So they basically saw that and they took that out. And now accessory structures are unlimited in size. They still require the separation requirements between a livable structure, but they're not limited in any fire area. Again, the next one down was the IBC construction under the IRC is now listed as an IRC scope. So they really defined the back to IRC of not having to deal with it. And one of these we found, or we were on the board, was the aircraft hangars that we had an amendment on several months ago. That was kind of a conflict. It's not in the IRC, but it was in the IBC. So as we go forward in code changes, they're trying to get the IRC to be a standalone residential code. And so that's what they're shooting for. Chapter 3, building planning, this addresses sunrooms. They've now, there wasn't a whole lot in the code that addressed those. It usually was engineering, but now they're putting those down to an American Sunroom Association and down to standards of the industry standard. So a lot of those will be referenced construction-wise by those standards. Story height, this one is difficult to explain. Going back to accessory structures, or actually to the scope of the IRC, limits residential structures no greater than 3 stories in height. And once you hit over 3, then you click into the International Building Code for apartments and stuff like that. So this one has a story height maximum framing not to exceed 11.7. And what the intent is that they had a section in the code that restricted exterior bearing walls and stud height to 10 feet in height. But what they found out was when you measure a story, you measure it from the lowest finished grade to the top finished floor of the second unit. So what this did was it gave you a 10-foot stud height and a 16-inch floor joist with decking on it, and that created 1 story. So a lot of people read this and went, well, I thought we were restricted to 12-foot in plate heights. That still is the case. And there still is a separate, I believe it further down, we'll get into it, but there's a separate table now provided in there for studs and wall bracing up to 12 feet in height. So this was just one that it kind of redefined, or it defined it better, the story height of the structures. Masonry wall height, same thing. They took into account the floor system instead of just the wall heights. Exterior walls, roof overhangs can now project within 2 feet of the property line if the bottom line of the eaves or overhangs is fire blocked, not just the underside of the eaves. Another one is projections are permitted less than 2 feet from property line, or not permitted less than 2 feet from property line. The current code limited those to 3 feet. So they actually gave you an extra foot of encroachment into the property line. Penetrations on exterior walls may require fire protection unless under 3 feet from property line. Again, the building code did restrict things to 3 feet in height, or 3 feet from property line, and then required a fire block or a fire rated wall after 3 feet, or less than 3 feet, I should say. Okay, so that one just defines that a little bit better. IBC offers additional options and flexibility and fire resistance for exterior walls. There's a few more tables and a few more prescriptive methods on how to achieve fire wall assemblies and fire stuff like that. So they added some extra options in there. Chapter 3, building planning, smoke alarms. Battery operated smoke alarms are permitted for alterations, remodels, and additions. Household fire alarm systems no longer need an approved monitoring system. This was for assisted living facilities and different home care systems that utilize the residential house as the business. So those were required to have household fire alarms, and now they are no longer required. New provisions address smoke alarms near bathrooms and cooking appliances. So there's a little bit more clarification on locations of those and what type of detectors should go in those locations. And feasibility exemption for interconnection has been removed. The code basically had an exemption that said if it wasn't feasible to interconnect fire alarms or smoke alarms, that was okay. And in this case, they took that exemption out, and one of the reasons is we now have smart detectors. We have fire alarms that actually sense each other and will act the same as if they were interconnected. So that's one of the provisions they made in the code. Carbon monoxide detectors require connection to house wiring with battery backup. Exterior work no longer triggers provisions in existing buildings. Attached garages require carbon monoxide detectors if there is access to the house. That's a new one. It wasn't required in there. It was just required in the house itself. I believe in the original 3 code, it required a carbon monoxide detector inside the door of the garage in the house. So they've kind of moved this detector all over, and now they're kind of coming back and saying, just put it in the garage. That's where it probably should be. So that's one change on that. Smoke detectors are required in bedrooms with fuel-fired appliances or adjoining, actually with a garage attached to, that's what that should say, and in bedrooms or adjoining bathrooms. So basically, the current code we're under required a smoke a carbon monoxide detector outside the bedroom areas and required a smoke detector inside each bedroom area. In this case, it will require a combination unit or both inside the bedrooms themselves. Roof access for solar voltaic energy systems. This code was added as it wasn't clear in the code on, say, two-story structures if you had solar panels under the egress windows on the second story. So they basically made a provision that says you have to have access out of those emergency egress windows on the second story to get down safely out of the structure. Solar panels near emergency exit and rescue openings, again, same thing, just rescue openings and pathways. The rooftop access for firefighters, that code was actually in the fire code, and building didn't require access around the panels on the top of the roof and the reason was for ventilation on fire. They would typically go to the ridge of the roof and ventilate if there's a fire in the building. People were putting solar panels all the way up and over the ridges and wasn't giving the fire department access to do that. So fire had that code in their fire code, and they basically flipped it now and put it over into the building code, which makes a little bit more sense as we actually do the plan review of the structure, and it wasn't getting caught until out in the field and the solar panels were being put on. So that was a switch they made. Building planning continued, swimming pools and spas. There were 2 sections in the IRC that addressed swimming pools, spas, and enclosures. There is a new code that came out in the 12. Late in the 12, we didn't adopt it, but there is a complete swimming pool and spa code now that's available, and we are recommending to adopt that. So it would take those different sections out of the code of the IRC and have its own standalone code. Floors, this provision is for decks. There's a whole section, a new section in the IRC regarding decks. It actually gives prescriptive methods on construction of the decks, down from footing sizes to deck floor spans and joist spans. So it's a whole brand new chapter in the code that addresses nothing but decks. And so it's pretty good. There was nothing in the code really that addressed it prescriptively, and so this has been put in for that purpose. Just more options. Chapter 6, wall construction. Portal frame designs, these are the wing walls on the garages. The minimum required capacity of hold downs has been lowered to 3,500. The hold down capacity used to be 4,200 pounds, and that was a pretty big bracket. They've actually reduced that down now to a 3,500 pound strap. So there's a cost savings in that right there. Another one was that portal frame design prescriptively in the code required 3 bottom sill plates, and they've actually reduced that down now to 2. So there's been some changes just in that garage hold down system that's actually been reduced down. Chapter 10, chimneys and fireplaces. Factory built fireplaces are now required to have an insulation shield to provide clearance between the insulation and the flue pipe. It was not clear in the code that was a requirement, and from what I'm hearing, most of the installers now and the manufacturer of the factory-built fireplaces and chimneys already have that built into their flue systems now. So that's a change. Energy efficiency. Our current code required a energy statement or an energy sticker to be put in the electrical panel, which would indicate the insulation used for the walls, the ceilings, and the floor, and also the window fenestration ratings and any other energy components that were put in the house. This section actually just goes a little further, and they actually kind of want a placard or a statement that will be put somewhere in the structure, in a utility room or behind a cupboard door or something like that. Very similar to what the mobile home or manufactured home has done, to where they're typically in a laundry room on the back side of a door, and it spells out all the energy and all the construction requirements that were put into that house. So someone down the road would know exactly what type of construction, what type of insulation were put in there. Insulation and fenestration rating, the code has added an alternate prescriptive method utilizing a U-factor equivalent. This one's kind of difficult to understand. It's more of a performance method. The code for energy, the code had a table that had prescriptive energy values. And I'll just say like the walls were required to have an R19 value. The roof was required to have an R30 value. I guess these values also have an R value or a U factor value. So if a designer wanted to utilize a U factor rating to meet those energy requirements, they could do that. And they put an extra table in the code in order to have some flexibility to be able to do that for prescriptive or for per performance. So that's a new table put in. Ceilings and attic spaces, the ceiling R value has increased from R30 to R38. And keep in mind that the R30 value was from a 2006 energy code that we had adopted. We never adopted the 2012 energy code. So we're jumping, quite a few code sections there just in energy. Insulation and fenestration requirements, wall insulation R value increased R13 to R20 plus, or R13 plus 5. What this is, a 2x4 wall. You can still build that, but you're going to have to meet an R20 or an R13.5, which is 13 would be the bad insulation in a 2x4 wall, and you'd have to have some type of rigid insulation of a minimum R5 on the outside in order to meet the code requirement. Decreased window fenestration ratings, they went from a 0.65 to a 0.32. Again, the 6.5 was from the 2006 code. Basically, a 6.5 is almost a single pane window, so there's not a lot, but the 3.2s, they did some research on those, and they're available. They're typically your vinyl windows, anything that has energy code, or what's the energy star labels and stuff like that. I found most of them are running a 0.30, so that's a change in the code. Mechanical makeup air for kitchens and exhaust systems. The prior code we were under basically said if you had a mechanical vent system over 400 CFMs, you would have to have some type of makeup air or some type of automatic dampener that would require makeup air. The code's kind of turned that around now and saying the dampeners are no longer required, and the ruling, the reason is most of the manufacturers now for the larger cook stoves and kitchens, I'll just say some of your commercial, well, one was it actually limited commercial type appliances in residential use. The manufacturers of those uses now have came back and labeled those and listed those for residential use, even though they are a commercial product, but they actually are now offering their own air dampening systems, or the code's allowing you to pull air from the adjoining rooms instead of having a dampening system to make up that air. So that's a pretty good change. Fuel gas, electrical bonding of corrugated stainless steel tubing. What they found out was the stainless steel tubing obviously is pretty popular now for gas piping. What they found was if it wasn't bonded and it was anywhere near some other type of metal in the house, the homes were getting struck by lightning and you were having an arc off the metal to the stainless steel, and the stainless steel was so thin it was putting a hole in the stainless steel and causing fires. So they came back and said, well, if the stainless steel corrugated tubing was bonded, it wouldn't be doing that. So that's this requirement. Plumbing, protection against physical damage. The current code required nail plates or pipe framing protection at 1.5 inches. The code is limiting that down to 1.25 inches now. This is your I won't say penetrations. This is your borings through your studs and stuff like that for nailing. So they're limited that down to 1.5 inches. The other one is, same thing. It's 1.5 inches, or 1.25 inches instead of 1.5 inches. Plumbing continued, hot water heater discharge. The temperature and pressure relief valve discharge pipe must have an air gap. I think that's pretty standard in our industry. We don't put it into the waste system or something like that. We usually just, it's in the garage or something like that. So that's not too relevant to us. PEX and PERT tubing for relief valves need to be one size larger than the TNB discharge outlet. What they're finding out is that the fitting for the PEX tubing is actually decreased in inside diameter, and so it's restricting the TNP valve from discharging. So they're saying to upsize that one so it's a consistent inside diameter throughout the pipe. And then a termination outlet at the end of the tubing for PEX and stuff must be fastened in place since it's a flexible tubing. Ground fault protection interruption. Current code requires all laundry room outlets in the laundry rooms to be GFI protected, and dishwasher outlets under the kitchen sink, and lighting outlets in crawl spaces. It also requires GFI protection on any outlets that are within 6 feet of a bathtub or a shower. Okay, and we have some amendments on those we'll get into. Appendixes, the IRC has several appendixes. One of them that we thought relevant, which came out in the 18 code, was tiny houses. Again, it's a new appendix that covers smaller type housing, and we are making a recommendation, well, it limits it to 400 square feet in size. And there's some other amendments that we'll go through. But basically, in the appendix for tiny houses, it had a lot of blanks, and it had the jurisdiction to input those blanks, ceiling height, clearances, and stuff like that. So it could be tailor-made to our jurisdiction. And so we anticipate adopting it, and we'll go through those amendments and those clearances that we're proposing. That pretty much covers the significant changes for both IRC and IBC. At this time,
Mr. Chairman, if I may, board members Renner and McKee are both on the line and can hear in the room.
Thank you.
if you would flip into your packet on proposed amendments. I'll let Sam, I don't need the overhead anymore. So on our proposed amendments that are in front of you, you'll notice that we've italicized bold and underlined, double underlined. Also, we've indicated changes that are in yellow. So basically, starting out, you'll notice as we go through, the bolded portion is amendments that we want to include or actually add to the ordinance, and then we have verbiage in here that has already been adopted by the board and just transferred over from the last code. So I'll try, as we go through these, I'll try to point those out too. Technical codes, the International Energy Code. We don't have a first page. And then number 11 down on technical codes is the reason for change is the code edition has been changed to reflect the 18 code edition. And again, new swimming pool and energy code is already addressed in the swimming pool and spa code that we're proposing to adopt. Flipping over to page 3, it's just a, page 3, number 6, is just a change of the addition of the code from 12 to 18. Page 5, violation penalties and remedies. Subsection E, basically underlined this, is want to add some verbiage in this has changed. So upon the notice of the building official, the work of any building or structure is being executed contrary to the provisions of the code or in an unsafe or dangerous manner, such work shall be immediately stopped. The stop work order shall be in writing and shall be given to the owner of the property involved or the owner's authorized agent or to the persons performing the work. And this, and we added this, and shall state the condition, this isn't, state the condition under which the work will be permitted to resume. Mine doesn't say that. So we added the provision of the notice shall be issued to the authorized agent or to the person performing the work, and we've added the verbiage or posted on the property or structure, and shall state the condition. So we've added that verbiage of posting the property, and we do that basically if we have a violation and nobody's present on the property or nobody's, within the state to do, we can post the property for red tag. Page 6, advisory board, subsection C. We've added this in here. Basically, the state law addressed 5 members, and our code advisory handbook addressed 5 members. And the state did put in, if you had additional members, they may be engaged in the construction and design industry. So we have to have a minimum of 5 per state law, but we can have up to 7, and those other 2 persons on the board can be from design or construction. Page 7, effective dates, subsection C. The ordinance addition dates and change to reflect the 2020 ordinance addition. Back when we did the aircraft hangars, we basically amended the entire code to be up to date with the 2020 ordinance number, so that's what that's referencing. Again, reason for change is just from the 18 code to from the 12. Subsection, or section 11, amendments and deletions. Replicable buildings, appendix number N. We didn't have this in our code. We feel it should be put in there. And what the change would be is it reflects 18 code and, well, I guess there's a statement that says appendixes are not part of the code unless we specifically adopt them. So we've adopted all these here. We've currently adopted all C through K, and we want to adopt a new N appendix, which covers replicable buildings. And it basically provides jurisdictions for the means of incorporating guidelines for replicable buildings, streamlining the document review process while verifying code compliance. In a big sentence, that means if we have a national disaster and we have a lot of buildings that come down at one time, if they're the same type buildings and the same thing, it gives us a replicable permit and inspection process in order to expedite getting these structures back up and running. Okay. Work exempt from permits, section 105.2. We have added the verbiage. Basically, in our last Code Advisory Committee, we made the amendment to exempt block walls 7 feet in height from building code requirements or from building permit requirements. We wanted to add a verbiage in there for clarification that the measurement from the bottom of the footer to the top of the wall is how that measurement should be made for 7 feet. And then also we wanted to indicate that manufactured home skirting is not considered a fence, so that would still require a permit if using block. Page 8. Timeline, we added the verbiage that we want to go to 180 days instead of 90 days. So I could grant extensions in times of periods not exceeding 90 days. We wanted to amend that up to 180 days. And the reason for change is to clarify expiration timelines and reinstatement requirements upon expiration of permits. Section 505.5 expiration, again, we marked out the 90 and put in 180. We feel the additional time is relevant or is actually more in line with our inspection times of 180 days in between inspections. 106, live loads and dead loads. We want to delete because the 18 edition requires commercial and industrial buildings for each floor or partition thereof designed for loads exceeding 50 pounds per square foot. And basically the code requires, we amended this out, we didn't require it in the 12 code. I think it's relevant, and it basically says that if you have an area, say like a mezzanine or something like that in commercial code, that if the loading of that floor system is over 50 pounds per square foot, which 40 is considered normal, that the area should be documented, basically a sign showing that. And we've seen this in commercial things where you have mezzanine areas that are used for loading of books or storage or something up on that mezzanine. And so it's just basically a labeling of that floor system to say, hey, it can handle that load. And so that's something we didn't put in the 12 code, but we request to put in the 18 code. Page 9, section 110.3.6. We want to delete this amendment. The code includes additional penetration and inspections for fire-rated assemblies that are different from the 2006 code. So again, we, for some reason, amended the 6 code into this on the 12, and we feel that it's relevant that it should go back to the 18 code to address fire-rated assemblies. Section 113, Board of Appeals. These 3 sections, 313, 314, and 315, the code basically gives guidelines on how to address appeals, address violations, and address stop work orders. We have already incorporated those those procedures in our code advisory handbook and our building code ordinance. So those are already addressed, and so we want to delete those from the ordinance. Section 303.3, associated E occupancy groups. The 18 code no longer differentiates between educational occupancies for assembly purposes. This is one where in the 6 code and the 12 code, if you had an auditorium in a educational facility, they classified those as different types of occupancies. The 18 code actually recognizes those now as they would still call them an E occupancy for an assembly, but they would still meet the assembly exiting requirements and stuff. So they've actually just kept the occupancy classification the same instead of creating separated occupancies. Section 310, this is a new section that I looked at Coconino, and I believe Yavapai County has addressed this. We have a lot of, well, I'll just say, we want to create a new occupancy group, a residential occupancy group, and it would be basically, in no better words, it would be cabins. It would be, say, something at the Wallapai Mountains that has a one-bedroom cabin or something like that. The current code requires fire sprinklers for any R structure that has anybody transient in nature. So a hotel, motel would require fire sprinklers. And I know Coconino addressed this a while ago with their KOA campgrounds and stuff, that is it really feasible to have sprinklers, in those small structures when you have one door and one room? So Coconino actually, created this, and we'd like to adopt it too, that it just addresses R1, R2, R4 occupancies, and it includes cabins, detached or attached, up to 300 square feet with less than 6 occupants or fewer, and still has to meet the fire separation distances in the IBC. And then they may be considered an R3 occupancy, which is a standard residential occupancy. And currently, the State Fire Marshal's Office has not required fire sprinklers in residential occupancies. So this would eliminate these sprinklers in these small type buildings. And until the fire marshal, until the state lets us adopt that or mandates us to adopt fire sprinklers in residential structures, this will stand true for these buildings also. Okay. Page 10, section 502. This is at the request of some of the fire jurisdictions. They are requesting in the IBC that the lettering and addressing number lettering of 4 inches be increased to 6 inches. And their reason for change is due to difficulty identifying rural properties. I think you're going to see it's pretty consistent in some of the larger industrial zones and stuff where they have larger than 4 inches. But it's just they want to create a standard at least 6 inches so they can see the structure and the identification from right-of-way. Section 703, marking and identification. This one was, I believe, deleted back in the 6 code. We'd like to reinstate it back with the standard of the 18 code. What it does is it addresses firewalls, fire barriers, and smoke barriers. So if you had a firewall, I'll just say separating occupancies, it requires to have that wall identified. To say it's some verbiage, I think it is 1-inch letters that says firewall, do not penetrate or watch penetrations. So it basically gives future people down the road the awareness that that is a firewall and that is a special wall that they'd have to take, address penetrations and address other things other than not being identified. So we'd like to add that back in the code. Sections 906.11, this is for portable fire extinguishers with minimum ratings. The current code requires a 1A 10BC type fire extinguisher for commercial applications. We recommend to go to a 3A 10BC, which is basically 2 sizes larger than your standard little small ones. And I think you'll see it's pretty consistent in commercial, that's what they do. But that's what amendment we'd like to see. Actually, they put this in only the R2 occupancies, and that's our recommendation too. R2 would be your monasteries, your college dorms, your housing that is not transient in nature. So it'd be like I said, not hotel motel, but it would be places where people are familiar with the site, but they are a hotel type situation. So just a larger fire extinguisher. Section 10053, occupant load. We want to delete this amendment. Again, in the 6 code, it was amended for some reason. We're not sure why. The current code, in the 18 code, addresses egress sizing and offers additional methods and exceptions that were not provided in the 6 code. So it was just the method of how to calculate the egress sizing and egress distancing. So I think the 18 code clarifies it a little bit better, and 6 code didn't address it at all. This code, let's see, opening limitations, section 1013.4. This addresses stair opening limitations in the IBC. Currently, the code, and it was brought to my attention actually before the meeting, that in 2006, they amended it, and I'm not sure they amended it, but the current code basically just says that the clearance on stair openings and guards from 6 inches on the side and 4 3/4 inches on the bottom of the railing. And that's been standard through the commercial industry for a long time. I've got it written wrong here, is actually 6 inches, and the 4 3/4 inches is not correct. So it changes it. And what we went back and looked at the 6 code amendments and looked at the 12 code, and it was always 6. So in this section right here, the 4 3/4 should not be applicable, and we want to just change it back to the 18 code, which references 6. Okay. Section 11762.11, that section just changed numbers for some reason. So we just had to change the number on that too. No changes in the code. Section 12011, again, it was just updated. The reason for change is this amendment is deleted because the 18 code provides for additional verbiage and clarification of non-absorbent walls in bathrooms. So there was a change of some type of material, material in the bathroom for absorbent materials. And I think it's pretty clear it was up to 4 feet in height or something of non-absorbent material, which is pretty standard in the code. So we're changing it just back to the 18 code, which just states that. Page 12, International Residential Code. So those are our proposed amendments for the International Building Code. Okay, so we'll go to the International Residential Code, page 12. Again, reason for change on their first thing is just reflecting the 18 code instead of the 12 code. We are adding the Appendix A, sizing and capacities of gas piping, and also wanted to add the Appendix C, which is exit terminals of mechanical draft and direct venting systems. These basically are prescriptive guidelines and tables that allow somebody to size those lines without having to do calculations, basically. I don't know why we didn't amend or have those adopted as appendix before, but it does help somebody and gives them options instead of having full calculations. Appendix G, again, that's part of the IRC, which address swimming pools. We have a standalone swimming pool and spa code now that we're recommending adoption, so that appendix would no longer be applicable. Appendix Q, again, this is a new section in the IRC. It addresses tiny homes. And again, this appendixes are only valid if we adopt them by reference. So the adoption A, C, and Q, which are the appendixes we wish to adopt. Yeah, okay. Bear with me. I know the yellow is kind of hard to get used to. Work exempt from permits, section 105.2. Again, we made the amendment to exempt block walls up to 7 feet in height, and again, In subsection 2 here, we're just clarifying how to measure that and measure it from the bottom of the footer to the top of the wall. And then again, reiterating that manufactured home block skirting is not considered fencing or block walls. Section 11, carports and similar type structures. Reason for change is structures under 300 square feet with no utilities are already exempt from the permit. We have that already in our ordinance that we amended. So we amended accessory structures without utilities could go up to 300 square feet without a building permit. And so this, we want to delete this out of the code at 200, since we already have it in the code. Page 14, section 106.11, information on construction documents. We want to amend this section to require plumbing, electrical, and mechanical plans to be a minimum of a single line diagram drawing. And the reason for change is staff feels that a single line drawing needs to be included into the construction drawings for locations and clarification of units and fixtures. This came up of, we've had some instances where mechanical units are getting put in garage attics and then breaching the firewall separation into the house, or vice versa. We've had probably 3 in the last, I'd say, year. And the problem we're having is we don't catch that without a drawing on the plans until we do the combination inspection. So in all these instances, these people had to pull those mechanical units out of that attic area with some considerable trouble because it wasn't on a plan. So that's what we're requesting, is just really a single line diagram showing where stuff is located, that we can make those decisions and see those, at a plan review level prior to construction. Okay. Page 15 to section 110.1, certificate of occupancies. We want to delete this section as basically U-type structures, they exempted from residential work. So this is kind of a carryover again, another kind of an IBC thing versus the IRC. In the IRC, accessory structures are incidental to the residential structure. So they don't ever get categorized as a U structure because that's an IBC. That's an agricultural building or an accessory building under the IBC. So we believe that basically we need to delete this section. And again, it removes the U category from the residential code and establishes residential accessory structures as incidental to the residential use. So we believe that should be removed. Section 112.1, Board of Appeals. I believe we have Board of Appeals, 113 violations and 114 stop work orders. Again, we want to amend these out as we already have these approved and in our building code advisory ordinance. Table 301.2. This basically is a table for climatic and geographical design criteria for our area. Basically, they leave it blank in the building code, and they have us fill it out of what our climatic conditions and our design criteria is. So we've added that in there of our wind load speeds, our topography effects, our wind zone regions, our seismic regions. So that is filled out in our code. Section 302.2.4, parapets. For some reason, in the 2006 code amendments, they made an amendment in regards to parapet roofs and fire rating of multifamily housing on common walls. The code in the 6 and the 12 code required a 2-hour firewall in between the structures, and if the structure did not have a parapet wall of 3 feet above the roof deck, you could go in and you could put fire-rated plywood or material 4 feet over from the wall for protection with no penetrations. For some reason, that was amended out in the 2006 code. Staff doesn't feel that's appropriate, and we want to go back to the straight 18 code, which just puts that condition back in there for the fire rating away from that common wall. And a lot of these are typically townhouse townhouses or apartments, and we haven't had a whole lot of them in our jurisdiction, so, but we're starting to get more, and I believe that fire protection is warranted. Section 302.13, protection of floors. The code, in the International Code and the 9 Code required all residential structures to be sprinklered. The state of Arizona mandated that jurisdictions could not require that. So a lot in the code, they changed a lot of the fire protection ratings. I'll just say the separation from the garage to the house used to be 5/8 type X drywall, and since the code thought that the building would be sprinklered, they reduced that rating down to 1/2 inch. Our code advisory committee, I believe in the 12 codes, amended that back up to the 5/8 type drywall. Another one was the roof floor structures in between units that have to be fire rated also were downrated to 1/2 inch, and so we recommend they go back up to be amended to 5/8 type X, unless fire sprinklers are required. Page 16, footings, 403.1 footings. We want to amend this to clarify footing requirements for accessory structures, and it would be declared that detached accessory structures of light frame constructions such as sheds and residential zones for private use without utilities may be on pressure treated skids and shall be anchored by an approved engineering method. That's typically what we're seeing on the smaller structures and then actually larger ones. So we feel that that should be clarified. Section Chapter 11, this is the Residential Energy Code chapter. We had in there that we referenced the 2006 International Residential Code Chapter 11 and energy requirements. We want to amend that to say the 2012 amendment did not require the use of the 2012 Residential Code, International in the Energy Code, and did require the use of the 2006 Energy Code. Staff feels the use of the 2018 Energy Code with the amendments listed below. So basically, we want to go just basically to the 2012 Energy Code, Chapter 11, with these changes. And the changes would be subsection N, testing. We want to amend the, basically this is the blower door testing. We want to change that to shall to may. So staff feels that the test is not necessary at this time for our climatic conditions. So we wouldn't require the blower door test, but it may be done as an option. Another section N, duct testing. This is basically the testing and pressure testing of the mechanical ducting system. Again, staff wants to make that optional instead of a shall, as we feel it's not necessary. And mechanical ventilation, this required whole house ventilation at certain ventilation rates. Again, staff feels that this should be an option instead of mandatory. And then equipment sizing and efficiency rating. This is your manual J calculations that would be required for mechanical systems under the Energy Code requirements. Staff feels that this should be put to shall instead of may, or may instead of shall. And again, staff feels that this test is not necessary at this time. So those are the Residential Energy Code amendments we are proposing, along with the Chapter 11 energy requirements. Another one in the Energy Code was pools and spas. There's a section in the Chapter 11 Residential Code that addresses pools and spas for energy. The International Swimming Pool and Spa Code that we want to adopt has the same verbiage in it, so we don't need that verbiage in the residential code. We're asking that to be deleted. Residential pools and spas, again, this was equipment, and we want to delete that section out too, as it's addressed in the International Pool and Spa Code. Page end of 16. Locking and access ports. This was a section that we already had amended out, and we actually want to delete. We want to keep that deleted out. What it was is basically on air conditioning systems, the Freon ports. They found out people were taking the ports off and sniffing the Freon and having a reaction. So the code people put in the thing of locking access ports, so only authorized people could access that system and service that system. I believe we amended that out in the 2012 code that it wasn't necessary, and I guess we just want to follow that over with just to delete that amendment. I'm off a page or something here. At the top of 17, oh no, I'm on 17, the 1502.46. This was a thing in the, oh, okay, we amended this. It basically was a dryer duct requirement that if the duct exceeded 35 feet in length, that a label would be put on the ducting system so somebody would know that this length is extended due to some circumstance. When we amended this in 2012 code, it wasn't very standard to have some of the high efficiency dryers and stuff that can produce, well, they have an extra fan duct that can push the lint and the stuff further than 35 feet. So basically in the 18 code, recognizing that we have some of these new high efficiency systems, and they can go over 35 feet, but we want to add in there that if they do, we need a label or something on the end of the duct so someone knows that this is a special system and they know how to maintain it. So it would just be a label at the beginning of the ducting saying that this exceeds the maximum 35 feet that's prescriptive in the code. And basically it's tied to the manufacturer's installation requirements for probably the appliance. So that's what we're asking for, is just a label on that appliance. And section 1901.3, prohibited locations. The reason we want to delete this section, the amendment is no longer needed because the 18 code specifically addresses commercial cooking appliances and residential use and directs users to the UL standards and manufacturer's installation instructions. This goes back to, I believe, the makeup error that was required under the last code section. So we want to delete that. The amendment we had made to provide makeup error and just go with the 18 code, which addresses the appliance, has the manufacturer's requirements. Section 2415.3, we want to amend this to add the following: that gas piping shall not be installed to a structure that is not attached to a permanent foundation. And clarification is the auger type hold downs and similar devices shall not be considered as permanent foundations. Staff feels that this added verb is needed to clarify use of utilities in accessory structures and foundation requirements. We're getting more and more of the sheds up on skids that basically have a very minimal hold down system, and they're actually, they're putting utilities in those and not addressing that those are really not permanent foundations. So staff and some of the other counties have done the same thing of they have to be attached to some type of a permanent foundation. Rough plumbing. Section 2503.51, rough plumbing, we want to delete this section. And the reasoning is the 2008 code allows additional piping materials and testing methods other than what we had amended before. So there's additional tables and additional materials that are included in the 18 code for clarification. Section P2503.5.1, rough plumbing and water test. This is basically the static water test for underground plumbing. So when you're building your house and you've sealed up all your pipes, we require a 10-foot head pressure on a static pressure test. The 18 code actually lowered that down to 5 feet, and staff doesn't believe that that's an adequate pressure to detect small leaks on underground. So we requested to go back up to 10 feet in height. Section 2601.4, plumbing systems and accessory structures. Again, this is to amend this section to indicate plumbing systems are not allowed to be installed in structures with permanent foundations, and then auger type hold downs and similar devices are not considered permanent foundations. So again, this is the utility portions in accessory structures. Section 3008, backwater valves. This was amended in the 2006 code not to require, and basically what this is the code put in that if you had a sewer system and your house lateral system is higher than the sewer main lateral, they were having backups in the main sewer that would back up into the house, and they were requiring a backflow device at the sewer outlet at the sewer main. We looked at this, and a lot of jurisdictions don't have the issue. I mean, we mostly have septics in our area, so the sewer systems aren't, we don't have those to require this, so staff feels it's not necessary. Plumbing section 3201.2, trap seals. Somehow in the 2006 code, they amended it not to require this, and what it basically is it identifies trap seals, and the 18 code addresses additional types of those in locations such as potable water, gray water, and wastewater. So basically they're not the backflow, they're the prime, how do you call it? Typically in bathrooms, if you have a floor sink, you have the trap seal that's primed, and it's self-primed by something else. So this just clarifies out what type of trap systems you need for what type of system you have. I don't believe the 6 code ever had that verbiage, and that's why they took it out. It wasn't clear of when those were required and what would be required at the time. The 18 code actually specifies it clearer and makes it more clear. Page 18, electrical systems and accessory structures. We want to amend this to add electrical systems are only allowed to be installed in structures with permanent foundations. And again, auger-type hold-downs and similar devices are not considered permanent foundations. Staff feels that this will clarify the use of utilities and accessory structures and foundation requirements. Section 39021, GFI protection locations. We want to amend this and replace the amendment with the required GFI outlet installed in the ceiling for the garage door opener may be replaced with a single outlet device. And again, the reason for change is amending, replace to add shall to may. If you recall, I believe in the 18 or the 12 code, we amended that section to require a single outlet, a single electrical outlet on the garage ceiling that didn't have to be GFI'd. So actually, we're clarifying this a little bit more. That says you can install other than a single outlet and GFI if you so desire, but you're still allowed to have the single. So just a clarification thing. You don't have to have a single. Okay. Section 3902.9, laundry areas. This is where GFI protection was required in all outlets in the laundry room area. We felt an exception should be provided there, so we want an exception of the washer and dryer electrical outlet may be non-GFI protected if the outlet is not readily accessible and the outlet is no higher than 32 inches from the finished floor. And that would be basically behind the washer or the dryer. So it wouldn't be accessible for someone to plug another appliance or something into it readily, easily. And then staff feels that the inaccessibility of the outlet is justified for the safety. Section 3902.12, this whole section just changed numbers. Nothing changed in the ordinance or the code. Same thing with section 3902.13. It just changed to 309.217 in the code. Section 4202, bonded parts. We want to delete this amendment, and the reason would be to reinstate the section which now clarifies bonding, addressing new installation such as low voltage wiring, and addressing non-conductive bonding parts. This actually was in kind of a pool section of bonding, grounding for pools. At the time, I believe we amended it. We already had adequate bonding, but the 18 code has addressed more of fiberglass pools and non-conductive parts and fittings. So this kind of clarifies out when you have non-metal parts, how do you bond the pool? And so it gives some ideas and basically some things on how to do it. Now we're going to the appendixes of the IRC. We currently had adopted Appendix G, which addressed pools and spas. We want to delete this appendix entirely, as will be wanting to adopt the 2018 International Swimming Pool and Spa Code, which already has these requirements in them. Appendix Q is minimum ceiling height. This is the tiny home appendix. So Appendix Q is tiny homes. Again, in the appendix, it had a lot of blank spaces so the jurisdiction could fill in how they felt necessary for their jurisdiction. One of them was ceiling heights. So we want to amend it to habitable spaces, bathrooms, toilet rooms, and kitchens shall have a ceiling height of not less than 6'4". The current code for residential is 7 feet, so it does reduce it 6 inches. And then obstructions of beams, girders, and ducts cannot extend into that minimum ceiling height. And staff feels the reduction of ceiling heights are justified for the tiny homes. Amend also section 106, toilet, bath, and shower spaces, minimum clearance in front of water closet to wall or cabinet in a tiny home to be reduced to 15 inches. The current code requires 24 inches in front of the toilet or bath or shower. This reduces it down to 15 inches. And again, staff feels the reduction is justified for tiny homes. 107, minimum room areas. Basically, habitable rooms, excluding loft, shall have a floor area of not less than 65 square feet for tiny homes. The current code is 70 square feet, so they've reduced that down to 65. And again, staff feels the reduction is justified for tiny homes. 107, minimum dimensions of rooms. Habitable rooms excluding loft shall not be less than 6'6" in horizontal direction. The current code required 7 feet for both horizontal. So they reduced it down to 6'6", and staff feels reduction is justified for tiny homes. 108 is the electrical requirements for a tiny home. Ampecy of underground connectors, underground service connectors shall have an ampecy not less than the load served. And for one family tiny homes, the ampacity of the underground connector shall not be less than 60 amps, 3 wires. I believe the current code requires 100 amps, or actually no, I think it requires 60 amps for residential structures, but this would be a minimum of 60 amps per that tiny home. And again, staff feels that the reduction of that electrical service is justified for the tiny home. That pretty much sums up all the residential amendments, including tiny homes. Quite a few, but not too extensive. Next in our chapter is the International Fire Code. And page 19, subsection C. And again, we're just updating the 2012 to the 2018 code on that one. And in the fire code, we do have several appendixes that we have not adopted, and we're requesting adoption. One would be Appendix K. Appendix K is requirements for existing ambulatory care facilities, access, the minimum fire and life safety requirements for building containing ambulatory care facilities. It's basically some exiting requirements and stuff have been changed. Again, this is an appendix, so it only applies to that section if we adopt it. Another one was Appendix A, is indoor trade show and exhibitions. I actually had some commentary on that one. Basically, these are amusement facilities, indoor trade shows, and associated with trade shows and exhibitions. What they called out for was, I believe, it was sprinklers. No, it was just conditions for indoor trade shows and exiting requirements for some indoor exhibits. So it's a guide or an appendix to have a prescriptive method of how to meet those requirements in the code. So we do ask that we could adopt those. International Fire Code exceptions. Section 906.11, the reason for change, again, we want to increase the fire extinguisher, the minimum fire extinguisher from a 1A to a 3A extinguisher for commercial locations, R2 locations, over 300 occupants. Reason for change is this is a retroactive code requirement which applies drastic impacts to existing structures. No, this isn't it. That's just our feeling of an increase of the size of the extinguisher for those non-transient kind of hotel situations is warranted. So section 1103.51, sprinkler systems for group A occupancies over 300 occupants. We're requesting to delete this section, and our reason is that this is a retroactive code requirement which applies drastic impacts to existing structures. It's staff's opinion that these retroactive requirements are unnecessary for the business in the county and are therefore deleted from the adoption. What it would require would be any occupancy of an A2, which an A2 could be anything from a hotel or could be a restaurant or a public assembly, but it would require anything over 300 occupant load to automatically have sprinklers, whether the business is existing or not. So we don't feel that's necessary. Section 3103.131, special amusement buildings, we want to delete this entire section, and the reason is this is another costly code change to the fire code that staff considers unnecessary. Tents and membrane structures are required to meet surface flame spread and critical reflux criteria and are considered non-combustible. This would be cost prohibitive and technically infeasible. So basically, these are special amusement buildings. This could be everything from your haunted house at Halloween, but it would require the building to be sprinklered right off. So we don't feel that that's necessary, and we don't have that problem. We want to delete that section. Section 3311.1, stairs required. This section actually required a secondary staircase while a building's under construction if the building is 50 feet or higher. So at 40 feet, the code would require a secondary temporary staircase out of the building during construction. Staff doesn't believe this is necessary. We rarely have buildings over 40 feet in height in our jurisdiction. And really, the county limits most buildings to 60 feet in height. So we don't believe that's necessary. Page 21, appendix, we're going to go into the International Mechanical Code. This one, basically, the mechanical code gives authorization or the authority, I believe, for stop work orders, means of appeal, and violations. We want to amend those sections out as our code advisory and current ordinance already addresses those operations in our code. Subsection E on page 21, plumbing code. Again, we're going to reflect the 2018 code. And this one also has the same thing, the authority is a violation, stop work orders, and appeals. We're requesting to amend those out and basically go with our building ordinance that already addresses that. Page 22, section 403.21. In the 2006 ordinance, they amended this out. The 2018 code allows for reduction in the number of toilet facilities and provides additional flexibility for family and assisted use utilizing unisex toilet facilities. So I believe in the 2006 code, the 2012 code, it required multi-sex unit bathrooms for most of the commercial installations. The 2008 code actually provides some flexibility and actually reduces those numbers down to unisex and also family or assisted use bathroom facilities. So we wish that change. IPC 715.1, sewage backflow. This is, again, the sewer lateral that would require a backflow protection device if the house was above grade on the sewer lateral. We want to delete that section out. Actually, we want to amend that to say may be required instead of shall. And that's it for the plumbing code. The International Electrical Code, again, we want to change additions from the 2011 to the 2017 code. And the reasoning for is this 2017 code addresses more flexibility for electrical installation and offers additional clarifications in the code. 2000, or NEC 406.3, basically just changed code section numbers to reflect the 218. To 680.26, electropotential bonding. We want to delete this section out. Our reasoning is due to the updated 2017 code edition, which now addresses more flexibility for electrical installation and offers additional clarification. This was, we had made an amendment of the 2005 electrical code to eliminate electropotential bonding. And actually, the 2017 code actually clarifies it a little bit better, and we still want that in there. 690.64, this is the photovoltaic section in the NEC code. We want to amend, or we want to delete this section. It was amended out of the 2005 code, and the reasoning for amending it would be to delete the section due to the updated 2017 code. One reason is the 2017 code no longer considers input from a solar array as a load, and therefore does not require the main bus panel bars to be derated. So there's some sections in the 17 code which changed quite a bit of the electrical on photovoltaic. That's it for electrical amendment possibilities. The International Fuel Gas Code, again, we're changing the code from the 12 code to the 18 code. We want to amend, or we want to adopt the appendixes, Appendix A, Appendix B, and Appendix C. Appendix A is sizing and capacities for gas piping. Appendix B is sizing of venting systems, appliances equipped with draft hoods, Category 1 appliances, and listed use of Type B vents. And Appendix C, exit terminals of mechanical draft and direct venting systems. And the reasoning is, in Appendix A, sizing and capacities of the gas piping is informative and not part of the code. It provides design guidance, useful facts and data, and multiple examples of how to apply the sizing tables and sizing methodologies of Chapter 4. So basically, it's just a guide. It's a guide that you could use prescriptively. Appendix B was sizing of venting systems, serving appliances equipped with draft hoods. This is basically for B venting pipes, and is not part of the code, but it contains multiple examples of how to apply the vent and chimney tables and methodologies of Chapter 5. So again, it's a guide for the Chapter 5 mechanical. Appendix C is exit terminals of mechanical vent and direct venting systems. It consists of a figure and notes that visually depict code requirements from Chapter 5 for vent terminals in respect to openings found in the building exterior walls. So again, these appendixes are all just helpful things that I believe we should amend to our code. International Fuel Gas Code 101, insert Mojave County into those brackets. And then 103, we want to amend the section to read, authority shall be in accordance. So these section 101, 106, and 108 are, again, our amendments are in the code, gave us authority to have violations, have means of appeals, and have means of enforcement. These, we request that these be amended from the code, and as they already exist in our current building ordinance. Subsection H on page 24, International Energy Conservation Code, 2018 edition. Reason for change, the new book addresses the requirements that are associated with energy conservation into one code location. This is the International Energy Code. We typically, well, I'll say the residential provisions of the NEC are not adopted as part of this code. The adopted energy code provisions are located in Chapter 11, Energy Efficiency Requirements of the International Residential Code. So this is a standalone energy code. We don't recommend adopting this for the residential code, but it would apply for the commercial IBC building code. And then in this section too, it also gives us the authority to conduct fees, stop work orders, a means of appeal. We feel those should be amended out as they're already addressed in our building ordinance. Next section on 25, subsection I, was International Swimming Pool and Spa Code. This is a standalone code on its own. Reason for change is the new code addresses requirements that are associated with swimming pools and spas into one code location. Again, the IRC had an appendix for pools and also had a section in the code that addressed pools and spas and barrier requirements. This code will put it all in one book. I'm not going to read all the way through these, but there are barrier requirements, and most of the changes in here are we have incorporated the Arizona statute. And I'll just give an example of the International Building Code addressed swimming pools of having 24 inches of water or less. The Arizona statute actually has a more restrictive code of 18 inches or less. So we've incorporated the Arizona statutes that are more restrictive than the building code into this section as an amendment. Another one was that the fence barrier heights in the pool and spa code were only required to be 50 inches in height, and the Arizona State Code requires it to be 60 inches in height. So page 25, 26 are basically the pool and spa code with amendments addressing the Arizona State statute. Page 27, International Existing Building Code. Again, we're reflecting the 2000 code to the 2018 code. No changes in that ordinance. International Property Maintenance Code, again, referencing the 2018 code from the 12 code. We are amending section 303 of the Swimming Pool and Spa Code. The reason for deletion is due to the proposed adoption of the 2018 International Swimming Pool and Spa Code. So this is some redundant language in the International Property Maintenance Code that is already addressed in the Pool and Spa Code. And that concludes our requested amendments.
Well, thank you, Gilbert. I know for the past 30 days, you've been reading this like 5 times. We have 4 speakers, so we're going to start with John Capanito. Items that you want to speak, what was reviewed, please.
Excuse me.
Could you state your name and your address for the record, please?
Name is John Caponetto. The address is P.O. Box 8974, Fort Mojave, Arizona.
Thank you.
What I'd like to address is, in this brochure that they initially came out with on why we should adopt building codes, they stress that we can go ahead and get a discount on our insurance rates, okay, based upon the CRS, which is the community rating system. I did a little research on how all that comes about, and the CRS, or I should say the ISO, normally goes ahead and gets a coordinator to come out to the community. That coordinator then will go ahead and take his reports, sends that to FEMA. FEMA then go ahead and gives their reports, and they tabulate the CRS. I'd also like to mention that the CRS is strictly voluntary. And so I tried to find out just how they tabulate the CRS score. And all that is done in the Coordinator's Manual 2017. Now, that manual is 641 pages long. However, pulling out the information that was pertinent to what I was looking for, there are basically 19 different activities that each community has to go through in order to achieve their points. These aren't CRS points, these are just points. Out of those 19 activities, each activity has so many elements. Now, the one particular activity involving the building codes is number 430, which is called higher regulatory standards. Now, in the higher regulatory standards, the elements that are in there are 17 elements. Of those elements, some of them don't apply to us because they have to do with tsunamis and have to do with coastal zones and that sort of thing. However, the maximum points that you can get out of the elements for this particular activity is roughly 2,462 points. Now, keep in mind, adoption of the building codes only comes to 100 points. Now, adoption of the building codes is in two categories. One's the actual adoption of the codes, and the other one is based upon the BCEGS rating, which we were talking about earlier. Now, the BCEGS rating, even at its highest rating that you can get, is only worth 50 points. And adopting all the codes that you can imagine is only worth 50 points. So on their schedule, for you to have a CRS class of 6, you're somewhere between 2,000 and 2,499 points. However, according to the standard under the coordinator's manual, the average rating for most communities is 270. Okay. And the total for all the activities, the average is 2,499. So if we take the average of 2,499, drop that into the ratings that they have for the classes, a class 6 is 2,000 to 2,499. So that's on the high end for class 6, which means even assuming that this area is on the average, okay, and let's say our score is 2,499, that's how we got to the class 6, which it is now. The worst case scenario is if we were not to even get that 100 points for adopting a high BCEGS or adopting the new code, $100 points less than that would get us at $23.99. Now, $23.99 is still a class 6. So how they say we're going to go to a class 8 is beyond me. Even if we were at the lowest end at 2,000 points, losing 100 points would get us in the next tier, which is a class 7. And the insurance rates only changed by 5% from the class 6 to the class 7. So the push to adopt the new building codes based upon all the advantages that we're going to get with insurance, it isn't founded. I can't find any information that says that we're going to go from a 6 to an 8, regardless of what our BCEGS score is. It just doesn't amount to that much to make any substantial change on what's going to happen with the insurance rates. I called up a number of insurance companies, and of course, they charge their rates based upon FEMA and the underwriting companies. And that discount that you get, you're only going to get that if you qualify for the discount. So it's not across the board thing that everybody's going to get this discount. It doesn't happen. So the push for the 2018 codes based upon the fact that it's going to hurt our CRS score, I just don't find that substantiated in this information. So that's why I want to bring it to your attention. Also, When I went through that entire 641-page manual, I did a word search on building codes, and in all the areas in there it says that you need to adopt building codes. It says you need to adopt strong building codes, but only in one reference, and one reference only, does it say current code. And it doesn't say the immediately current code, it just says the current code, but it emphasizes as appropriate. So the other thing is, in reading that same pamphlet, they also state that in there, you shouldn't try as a community to go ahead and increase your CRS score based upon the fact that you want to see lower insurance rates, because the amount of money you're going to spend trying to implement the activities is going to far exceed the cost savings that you'll get on the insurance. Thank you.
John, let's see if board members have any question for you. Any questions?
Well, so are you basically saying that they shouldn't adopt the new code?
Well, I'm against the codes entirely, and this is just one of the reasons for, trying to adopt the codes is because it's going to change our CRS score. It's just unfounded. So if you want to come up with other reasons why to adopt the codes, well, that's another argument. However, I really see no demonstrated need for the 2018 codes at all. Nothing's changed. The world hasn't changed. Bullhead City's been on the 2006 code. I'm sure they've had a number of inspectors that have applied over the last 14 years. They keep training all them with the 2006 code. They're not stuck and can't hire anybody because they say they can't find anybody because you have to go to the 2018 codes for training. So I don't see the need for it.
So John, what you're saying is that other jurisdictions, they do not need to have certificate for their inspectors, or, because I guess one of the argument that was here was that because 2012 certification is not available after this, or it's not available even now. So I'm just asking that question, since you...
Well, the city of Bullhead City is not going to go ahead, they're not adopting the 2018 codes, and they're going to keep getting inspectors, and they're going to keep training, so how are they doing it?
Okay, so they do like self-certification. So
I don't know how they're doing it, but they're doing it.
Okay. Thank you, John. Any other question?
Any other questions?
Thank you, John. Mr. Adams, Larry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. Larry Adams, 2007 Highway 95, Bullhead City, Arizona.
Thank you.
I'm here representing Mojave Valley Contractors Association. We sure got a lot on our plate we're trying to address today. And I would kind of say, we can't deal with all of this in a 2.5-hour meeting. Just the amendments need a lot more careful consideration. We need to have plumbers, mechanical people, electricians in here. I'm not qualified to comment on these things. I'm a general contractor. But there's a whole lot on our plate. Looks like we got a lot of rush here. In general, I would say, it appears to me we'd be a whole lot better off to amend the codes we have rather than try to get a new code and figure out where we're going to go from there. And excuse me, I meant to bring some props, and I'll pick them in just a minute.
Sure.
I've been attempting to get copies of the 2018 building code, and I've only been in this business 60 years. I learn something every day and trying to get the current codes. My secretary was down with COVID. She says, in the 18 building code, do you want the IBC, International Building Code, or do you want the IEBC, the Initial Building Code? I said, well, I guess the code we're under now, I get a whole new code book I didn't even know we had. I don't know what we do with it, but I got it. And I'm still trying to get the 2018 building code. I do have the residential code. And I'll point out that this is a 2006, this is a 2018, and this isn't a part of what we're trying to adopt. But when you look at this, they say, oh, we've got a few significant changes. We have thousands of changes. And I would ask Gilbert, has anybody made an economic assessment of what it'll cost to go to this new building code? Have we done it locally? No. Did they do it nationally? No. The question is, does anybody care? I care. And my home buyers care what it costs. But what's missing out of all of these equations is we don't care what it costs. We do care what it costs. Everybody in the United States is struggling with affordable housing. I wonder when it's going to dawn on them that part of the reason we got to struggle with affordable housing is we keep adding thousands of pages of regulation, expense, and complexity, and I would say with no demonstrated need. Has anybody ever died in an unsafe building in Mojave County that anybody's aware of? I've been here 55 years. I'm not. They like to say that we're saving lives. I agree with that. But if nobody's dying, how can we save lives? So why do we keep lumping on expense and complexity with no demonstrated need? Now, certainly you need to change. Things come to light. We may need to amend the codes we're under. We have amended the codes we're under. But there's nobody alive, single person, has any clue of what the impact of adopting all of these new codes is. Somebody will go to school, somebody will pick something out of it, and for years we'll be rung with this new requirement, that new requirement, another new requirement, and I'll guarantee you it all amounts to more cost, more complexity with no demonstrated need. And I hate to go so long-winded, but I've just sent here through an hour and a half of this. So I'll go down this list specifically. Mr. Caponetto's pretty well debunked the insurance cost savings. They're not there. You'll spend way more to reduce your insurance by $5 than you'll ever recover in a lifetime. That's number one. Lessens damage from fire and natural hazards. Well, maybe. We have hurricanes going through Florida and Georgia where they have the most stringent current building codes in the world, still destroying the communities. Avoid criminal or civil lawsuits. I would ask this question. Has there ever been a lawsuit filed in Mojave County because you didn't enforce the building code, ever in the history of Mojave County, that you're aware of? I'm not aware of any. So why are we so afraid of lawsuits and liability? And if you're afraid of liability, don't enforce the code. That's easy to cure. But it's never happened. But this is a reason for doing it. Ensure the safety of your family or your business. Pretty evident that's pretty good right now. We're not losing anybody. Okay, over here, State Fire Marshals transitioning to the 2018 fire code. We don't care. Big deal. I think they have 5 people on their staff in the state of Arizona. I spent 35 years in the fire service. It's not a significant thing. Local fire departments are going to enforce the code anyway. It's just not important. It says we're going to be required in the state of Arizona. Well, maybe. Okay, 2012 building codes do not meet the 2018 fire codes. Okay. Conflict and confusion between codes could result. We have that now. Anybody in the building business will tell you what's enforced in Mojave County is different to what's enforced in the city of Kingman, what's enforced in the city of Bullhead, even when we have the same codes. Everybody's interpretation's different, and you're just going to comply to whatever that jurisdiction thinks you ought to comply with, and they're all different. There's no conformity anywhere. Okay, I'm going down the list here. Okay, it says ICC no longer provides support, training, or certification for 2012 codes. I would like to ask Gilbert, what you mean by support?
They no longer provide the books, they no longer provide the training, and they no longer provide certification for that code.
Okay. How much school is necessary to certify a building inspector?
It takes an ICC test for certification. If they don't provide the test for that code edition, they cannot be certified in that code edition.
Okay. Is there any reason why they can't be certified in 2018 and enforce our codes in 2012?
As you mentioned, there's numerous changes between the codes.
I understand there's changes, but we're going to amend it and we're going to have changes anyway.
There's numerous changes between 4 different code divisions. So a new inspector today, if they even got certified, would be under the 18 code. They would have to try to know the 2006 code, which no longer has a book available for you to learn it.
Are old books available?
We threw ours out after the 3 code was adopted.
Maybe you shouldn't have done that.
They're no longer applicable
Okay.
since we went to the next code section.
Ms. Adams,
Now, the
Ms.
last I
Adams.
heard, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Ms. Adams,
Yeah, excuse me.
could you address the board, please?
Pardon?
Could you address the board? We don't want to go to
I'm
like
sorry. Okay.
one-on-one.
My
sorry.
apologies.
No, that's all
I was
right.
asking questions of Gilbert.
I
My apologies.
appreciate it.
Okay. Last I heard, to get certified, you had to send your inspectors to a 40-hour class in Las Vegas, 5 days. I don't know if that's changed. I would ask Gilbert if it has.
Okay.
We do provide training. It is not necessary for them to take that class in order to pass the test. A new inspector is required to obtain the certification with 6 months of employment, and that's on their own. If they don't have that training or they don't provide that themselves, they do not have a job.
Okay. All right, that kind of answers it, but I'm kind of bewildered. This is one book. We've got about 15, and we're going to learn that quick. I think you get my point. Okay, this one I love. Neighboring jurisdictions are adopting the 2018 building code. I'm an old dog. I've been around a long time. I know how this game's played. We got to adopt it because Havasu's going to. Havasu says we got to adopt it because the county's going to. That circle just goes around and around. If nobody adopts it, we don't have the problem. But one uses the other as a justification. It's not valid. Okay, Mr. Campanetto has addressed the insurance thing fairly well. Okay, I think, Mr. Campanetto, I'm going down this list here. This was provided by the county. I've tried to address every point here. Pretty well from this point on where I quit, Mr. Campanetto has addressed. This lower insurance rates, floodplain, all of that is just not valid, excuse me. And nobody considers the economic impact of this. But I see absolutely no need whatsoever. We still get our client chimes rung every day by building departments because somebody dug into these thousands of pages and found a new thing that we can comply with. Never any notice, never any forewarning, just all of a sudden here's something else that cost us hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. And that's with a code we have experience with for the last 10 years. I shudder to think, with a new code, what the cost is going to be. With that, I'll answer any questions I can. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any question for Ms. Adams? Thank you, Larry. Mr. Spurlock?
Appreciate the time. Not used to doing this.
Could you state your name and your address for the record, please?
My name is Davey Spurlock. I'm representing Ant Farm Construction. The address is 2661 North Apache Drive. So with the building codes, one of the things that was brought up was more consistent with the inspections. And having built all over the county, especially framing, the one thing that we don't see is consistency at all. We deal with different inspectors every time it's inspected, and it's different for every area we're in, whether it's Fort Mojave, Mojave Valley, Kingman, outside of Kingman. And to say that adopting the 2018 code is going to help make things more consistent, what happens when somebody finds another code and decides, like we've dealt with over the past 5 years, that all of a sudden this needs to be implemented because all of a sudden it's important? So we've framed the same house 100 times, 1,000 times. But now all of a sudden this house isn't safe because of, instead of a strap being on the outside of the garage, it needs to be on the inside. So it changes what we're trying to do. And I don't understand why implementing another 1,000, 3,000, 5,000 pages is going to make our building safer. So that's all I've got for you today.
Thank you. Any question from the board? Any question?
Thank you.
Thank you. Tyler? Mr. Angle?
My name is Tyler Engel. I'm with Engel Homes. I live at 1429 South Copperwind Lane in Kingman. I'd like to thank the board for their time and service. I know you're getting paid real well to do this, and I thank the staff as well. I would like to start off saying I really appreciate that the staff is kind of sidestepping the energy code there and all of the shalls that they are suggesting we change to mays is really going to be helpful from a builder standpoint to not have to do that. Talking a lot about the costs, some of those things that they've sidestepped are really going to be best overall and help us keep the costs down if this is adopted, and to minimize the big ticket changes. So I really appreciate that. A couple comments on the permanent energy certificate. I didn't see anything wrong with the way we were doing it, which was putting, at least in Kingman, we were putting a sticker on the inside of the electrical panel to list the R values and the other details that they were wanting on there. And so I feel like we could keep doing that rather than buying a rivet gun or something and attaching it to a door somewhere in the house. And then the other one I wanted to comment on was the R106.1.1, which is the mechanical and plumbing plans. On the mechanical, we actually have mechanicals because we went to spray foam and have to have them, but we also have them on our floor plans. It's just indicated where in the attic that the air handler and that heater is going to be in the house. So the reviewers would be able to see by just looking at the floor plan where that's going to be and make sure it's in the house or garage or wherever it's going to be, and if that's allowed or not. So I don't know if we really need to do full mechanicals. And then also on the plumbing, it's suggesting doing the single line for the plumbing, where I looked up some examples and they seem a little bit like overkill and also not useful. So they just have a line of water supply and then a fixture and then another line for a drain and then it going out of the house, which all of that's implied, right? If I'm going to put a sink, it has to have all that stuff, and they're not like geographic on the plan, so it doesn't really help anybody know where to put the pipe exactly. So I kind of feel like the plumbing plans may be overkill and not really useful for people to show that there is going to be pipes and drains for a little 3-bedroom house. Plus all the plumbers they like to plumb it their own way. And so if you did get down to the detail of, okay, the pipe's going to come up in this wall at this size and exit here or go overhead, then a new plumber might do it a different way, and then we might fail because the plumbing plan isn't followed to the T. So those are the only comments I had on the 2018.
Thank you. Any question? Gilbert, well, we have that. Could you elaborate the logic behind that items that Tyler has stated?
Chairman, board members, Tyler, just as you said, what we're requesting is a single line, say you're mechanical. You're showing us where your mechanical unit is, you're showing us where your access is. That's really what we're asking. We don't get that on a lot of plans. We're not asking for isometrics or for calculations or actually even register or intake locations, because we know those change out in the field too. But the main units themselves and locations are going to be helpful for us. Plumbing-wise, we've had some discussion on that is, yeah, what do we want to see? We already get a floor plan layout with electrical and the plumbing fixtures. We're not too concerned on getting something like isometric drawings, or because we don't do gas sizing, pipe sizing, or water pipe sizing. So that's not going to help us. But we do need to know where the water's coming into the house and where sewer's going out of the house, and just your basics of that. So a floor plan drawing and just that. But the mechanicals we've had issues with. As I said, we've had some units that were not placed correctly, and the plans, you wouldn't be able to indicate that on a plan. And it wasn't caught until the unit's put in. So what you're doing on your plans, I believe is feasible for the mechanical portions that we want.
Okay. Let me ask you this, Gilbert. What significant it is to know for the plan checker where the water goes from, let's say, the meter by the street to the right of the building or to the left of the building? I don't quite understand that part. And then, obviously, if you're talking about the wastewater, we have two kinds. One is basically sewer system, which basically comes most of the time to the street, so there would be a clean out. And in most cases, you're at the mercy of the service provider. And those of us who've been in this business long enough, we know that, even sometimes getting the asphalt from them doesn't mean that, it's going to be in that particular location. And I can assure you that, it is happening all over. In terms of the septic, well, any application that is going to be turned in, the septic application is also, along with it, is coming to the Mojave County, and, they show where the tank is and a location, and the clean out, basically goes in there. So if you're not thinking about the isometric inside, and you're thinking about just the water going into the house and sewer going out of the house, what's significant that is going to be, because you're going to inspect it when it is connected to, the sewer, and you're checking the plumbing as well. So, I mean, what does it do for the building inspector?
I guess it doesn't do a whole lot, since we don't do water sizing, which is required by the code, but which we don't do.
Yeah.
So that would be the main thing of isometrics and stuff, of checking the pressure sizes and the water pipe sizes based on the flow connections. Since we don't require that, you've got a point of as-built do come in at different, like you said, sewer comes in and mandated by where the sewer lateral comes in. So I guess just clarification on some essences of where things are.
Yeah, and again, I can, in most cases, I know that, a draft person draws up the plan, not the plumber. So you have a draft person making some assumption with, in most cases, maybe some knowledge about plumbing, and it is just to satisfy the plan checker. And then, the plumber, as Tyler said, he's gonna go out there and he's gonna find the way that they are doing and getting it, to the thing. So in my opinion, what's gonna happen is your building inspector is gonna look at it, and it says, hey, this is not per the little drawing, that single line that you have here, so you need to go back and get another review to basically get it done. So it creates confusion, I believe, in the field for the building inspector versus the plumber versus the general contractor, because a draft person is the one who is going to draw the plan, not the plumber, not the mechanical contractor. Even, on the air conditioning, air handler, and all that we talked about. I know that, we are showing that little box here, there, but mechanical contractor is gonna look at the framing and see where he would be able to, visibly, get the inlet and outlet, to it. So they're not normally in exact location, and again, as long as, you're concerned about the weight of the trusses and make sure that, they're carrying the load. I've yet to see that, they have beefed up any of the trusses. And talking to the truss company, which I use, Tri-State Truss in Bullhead City, they say that this is all, calculated in. There is an overkill for these trusses that, they're already calculated in. And I haven't yet to see that, oh, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and change this truss to a 2x6 because, the air handler moved from one end to another. But, that was a requirement that we have, and we are complying with that, with showing, as Tyler said, the location of the, mechanical unit in there. So, and again, that's done by the, not mechanical contractor, it is done by a draft person, just for your information. Tyler, you have any other comment?
Oh, no, that's it. Thanks.
Any other question? Yeah, please.
I was just going to add also, when a lot of builders are trying to do standardized plans, to streamline the process, you're talking about sewer and water coming in and out. Well, if you standardize a plan, it's not going to work when you do a reverse plan, a flip plan. Every lot's going to have the water and sewer going in a different place. So you're going to wind up with a set of standardized plans that has no relation to the actual site you're building on. So I was just going to point that out.
Okay, Mr. Adams? Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't.
Oh, I have one thing.
My bad.
Since we're talking about,
Yeah, if I could, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the formality. Just a comment, and I guess I'm confused. A requirement in Bullhead City has been forevermore on your site plan. You show the utilities where they are located on the lot and where they enter the building. That's a requirement for the site plan, and certainly it has been for as long as I can remember. So we automatically do it for the city, so the county gets it. What he's telling me, that's all they need anyway. So I don't see a problem. It's not a one-line drawing. You just put in a requirement on the site plan that you will identify the source of the utilities and the location they enter the building. That's a minor thing. But yes, it changes with there's no cookie cutter.
Yeah, Mr. Engel, I think a concern was about the interior drawing. Tyler was concerned about, the inside the floor plan and the drawing to show where the lines are gonna go. I think that's basically, I've seen it in some ordinances that they use isometric plumbing and all that and show the size of the thing. I think that was the concern. But what Gilbert clarified is that, inside going into the house and going out to, wastewater system.
Well, that's a fear. That's the way it reads.
Right.
But when Gilbert clarifies that and he says, we just want to know where it's coming from the lot and going in the house,
Right.
Minor deal. But that's not what the proposal says.
Well, that's why we have this discussion and debate right now.
Okay, thank you.
Keith, I apologize, I didn't see you. You could
that's
have knocked
okay.
on the glass for me.
just speaking of the one-line diagram on electrical, I mean, it wouldn't show where the electrical panels were anyhow, and I think Larry addressed it right, where on a site plan, it would make more sense. And if we are going to be required to do a single line for the electrical, are we just going to stop with the main panel or not even mess with it?
Member Walker, no, electrical, we usually get the floor plan layout of the electrical and the outlets and everything like that, and that's sufficient for us for plan review.
Okay, so
One example I was going to bring was the mechanical. We've had issues where we do get the truss layout schedule. It does show where the mechanical unit is located, but you go to the floor plans and it doesn't show where the mechanical unit is located, but it might show an attic access in the garage. So we have to make sure that attic access is within 20 feet of that unit and that clearances and service clearances are required. So that's really where I'm going with that. It just needs to be shown, some of it, for clarification.
I appreciate that. Yes.
Just speaking to that point, I can understand that, and I think, as you know, any plans we draw, we have
I mean, it should be located, you know, where that mechanical unit is going to be, where the access is going to be. But that's a far cry from a single line. You know, I'm up here thinking about the 80 sets of standardized plans that I'm going to have to change and add a mechanical plan to. So you know, again, I kind of shared Tyler's fears, and I'm glad that he brought that up. I think you know, if you're not getting that from some people, maybe that's, you know, a comment on a plan check correction to identify those things rather than making the 99% of people that are showing it correctly do more work.
And I can agree with you too, Mr. Ergy. If I can say, we used to get, I'll just say a mechanical drawing, we used to get a one-line diagram on the roof plan that showed where the unit was, the register locations, and the size of piping to those. Again, we're not sizing the units, we're not using manual J calculations, so I kind of agree with you. It's not needed, and it could be just a red line item on the plan.
Yeah, I think, Rex, I believe that, you know, that is something, that's why we have this discussion, to be able to review it and, you know, work out something, because we have one side who is, you know, administrators, and here this is the side that, you know, some of us are in the field. So definitely we can find a happy medium between the two sides. Do you have any other questions? Anything? If not, you know, I'd like to start going back because I know it was like a long reading that he had to do. So as we go through it, if you have any comments on any section, which I know I have some, you know, we can go ahead and discuss that. So, you know, let's just start with the beginning when the draft of proposed amendment and the commentary is. It doesn't have a page number. On that one, could you elaborate, Gilbert, on this energy code for the 2018? What is entitled? Just in a very short version, you know, what is going to do? I mean, in terms of like, you know, what is going to be added to the 2012 that we have? What are you looking for?
Chairman, yeah, we looked at it, and actually in the 12 code did require the blower door testing, so the pressure testing of the thermal envelope.
I know, but we didn't adopt to 12.
No, but I'm just giving you some background. The 12 code required all those bells and whistles. We didn't do that.
But what I'm saying is that since we did not adopt 2012, and it didn't exist for us, now that we have 2018, understanding that there was nothing on 2012 that we adopted, what are we going to be getting with the 2018?
Okay, basically the same thing as the 2006. The only changes that were made were an increase in the attic insulation from R30 to R38. There is an increase in the window fenestration rating, or the U factor rating on the windows. And that's about the only energy requirements. A change in 2x4 walls for insulation.
So if it is basically those two items, why do we need to adopt the whole, 2018 energy code?
Well, it's not just energy, it's just Chapter 11 in the IRC that addresses energy for single-family residents.
So what I'm saying is that you're saying that, based on the comment that you just made, between 2006 to now, the only changes are the garages are going to be R38 and the windows are going to have the R factor 3 or U factor 0.31 or whatever it is. So my question to you is that if there's only two items that you're concerned about and you're making a recommendation, why can't we just amend that to adopt these two items only instead of adopting the whole 2018 energy section?
It's different. The 2006 code basically had a table, and it had all your prescriptive requirements. It had your floor insulation, your ceiling insulation, your wall insulation. The same table is in the 18 code. The only changes in that table were they upgraded the ceiling insulation, the wall insulation, and the window fenestration rating. So it's the same table. Now, part of the thing we didn't adopt that the 6 code did not have was the blower door testing, the duct ceiling testing, manual J calculations, and one other thing. So we felt that, well, one was the air exchanges. So we felt with our area, and that is such a large jump from the 6 code to the 12 code requiring those, and they're costly, The blower door test, I hear is $300, and it's a third-party test. Okay, but without those elements in the energy code, we're only changing 3 things, and the table stays the same.
So basically, you're saying there is no hidden surprise in this 2018 energy code,
No,
beside these 3 items?
table's the same.
Okay? Yes, sir.
Gilbert, would this be, I'm not understanding completely, are we going to require a blower test or not?
No, we've recommended amending that section out that did require it to not require it.
Okay, just double check and make,
So again, the blower door test, we are amending out to say shall instead of may, or may instead of shall. The air sealing of the mechanical ducting system, may to shall. The shall to may. What was the other one? The window fenestration rating would go up. What was the other one? The mandatory air exchanges of the house, which would require a high efficiency furnace. It would require, what is it? I think we calculated it out to 50 cubic feet per second, which is equivalent to a bath fan. And even Kingman, we looked at that, and Kingman said it's not cost effective to provide that air exchange for that low of an air exchange. The mechanical unit is a high rev unit that would do that, and it's just not feasible to require that. So the 4 elements of really the testing of the tightness of the house, we've amended out. We want to delete.
Okay, any other questions so far?
Yeah, I can say, I'm a man after Larry's heart. I don't like change just for the sake of change. But at the same time, I do understand there are reasons that you do update codes. You don't, again, you didn't do it in 15. We're doing it to 18. Again, there are several things in here. For one thing, the portal frame hold downs, that weight actually went down. So those hold downs are going to get cheaper. So I was happy to see that. I was most concerned about the energy requirements. 2 questions I have about that. The first one is the fenestration ratings are going about in half. My concern is one of the things while you're going through your presentation, I talked to my window supplier and got the U values, and they're right on the edge of where it is you're requiring. So, I may get some, and again, it's not like I'm not using what I consider to be Energy Star windows, but those U factors, about half of them are over and half of them are under that 0.32. So I'm a little concerned that, we're right on the edge. I'd hate to order a window package and find out that 3 of the windows are 0.34 and don't meet your regulations while the rest of them do. And the other concern I have is just the wording may, when you're changing everything from shall to may, to me that still is not saying you're not going to require it. It's saying you may require it, as opposed to optional or. So those are my concerns.
Chairman Azarmi, just a point of clarification on that. Change shall is you must do it. By us changing that shall to may it's the builder's option. So the builder may do those things. We'll only require the shalls.
Yeah, the may is applicable to the contractor, I believe. If that is the case, Gilbert, that Rex brought up, which is a very valid point, can we just say that, you're looking for like a dual pane low E windows, something like that? Rex, would that work for you? If you just say dual pane low E windows instead of like, any specification?
Yeah, I would say either that or just raise that U value just a little bit. The highest one on the chart of windows, for instance, that I'm seeing that she sent me is 0.34. And again, I would hate to have like, oh, that one window there doesn't comply when the 11 others do.
Chairman and member, yes, looking at that, I went back to the 6 code, and the 6 code had a 0.65 rating. In the next code, the 12 code, it did jump it down to a 0.32, and it stayed a 3.2 through the 15 code and the 18 code. But like you said, I think, and I was even did some research on that, mostly all the vinyl windows passed, but a lot of the steel windows or aluminum windows didn't. They were in a 5.0 and a 4.0 category. So I don't think it's unreasonable to, let's pick a middle ground here, because the industry really hasn't came up to that yet, and I think that it's coming.
I used, you know, our window, they are vinyl windows, and again, they're just, you know, I looked just to check, and yeah, there's, you know, we say they're right there, but some of them are over, some are under 0.32, and that's obviously one manufacturer, but I assume that other window manufacturer would be similar as far as, okay, it is an Energy Star window, it is a vinyl window, it's a low E, and yet it might still be a 0.34 and not a 0.32.
I did a search, and I went to one of our home suppliers, the biggest one in town, that sells probably the worst windows, and all their windows were 0.30, I mean, for the vinyl. I was surprised, and those weren't gelled windows, those were...
Director Walsh?
Chairman Azarmi, as Gilbert mentioned, we looked at this issue, and that was one of our concerns is, okay, what is the energy going to do to this? How does that affect the builders? And as Gilbert said, he looked at those, and you know, a lot of them were 0.3, but just as you found, some of them are above that 0.32. And one of the ideas that we had, that actually Gilbert had mentioned to me, was rather than go with a 0.32, move the windows up to say a 0.4 or you know, 0.45, and then that way the current windows that you can currently buy out there right now would still meet that requirement. And like Gilbert says, you know, the industry's going that way to where it's getting more and more. Eventually they'll catch up to that 0.32, but at this point, rather than put the hardship on the contractors, we'd basically increase our ratings, which is still less than what we saw in the 06 and the 12 codes. We're still making an improvement, but it's still something that's feasible for the builders to do.
That's true, and that's why we have that Colorado River, to make sure that, you know, it doesn't cross the river, you know, stays on the other side. Any other comment?
I would just say again that I do really appreciate, again, to Larry's point and some of the others, I think you guys have done an excellent job of taking out the things that are extremely expensive, you know, those blower requirements and the mechanical calcs. I mean, you could have added $5,000, $6,000 to the house in a blink of an eye. So I'm very glad that you've chosen not to do that.
Well, just the fire sprinkler in the residential, plus, you know, the other factor that you have, just look at the state of California. You're looking at about 25 to 30,000 on just few items. Okay, any other comment? So we move on to the page 3. I have just a complimentary comment, but I'm glad that you left section 4, chief building official. It has nothing to do with Gilbert, but I mean, you know, we had some history on that, so I'm glad that, you know, there is a mechanism in place for making sure that you know, the direction of the director would be involved on that. Again, my question, Gilbert, and also Director Walsh, is on the fee schedule, item C1 on page 4. The schedule of fees shall be formulated by chief building official, but again, there is a mechanism that has to be reviewed by the Code Advisory Board, Planning and Zoning Commission, and the Board of Supervisor. It is not a unilateral decision, right?
That's correct. Any change in fees would come before this board, Planning and Zoning Commission, and then the Board of Supervisors for approval. And there are no fee increases proposed with this change.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, on section 7 on page 5, we have the list of the unlawful for any person to do certain work and all that. And again, I don't know how many of the board members were with us. I know Keith was one of them. We had that discussion on one of the building officials insisted that the repair has to have a permit. And even when I asked the question, and you can go back on the record and, you know, check that, if somebody wants to change a garbage disposal, do they have to have a permit? And it was said yes. And I said that, if he doesn't do it, is that a class 2 demeanor and all that? And the answer was yes. So I just want to make sure that, somehow, if you could, have some sort of a stipulation there that this would not be taken advantage of, because, there should be a limit to that repair. All of us, I'm sure that, have done some repair at our homes, like garbage disposal changing or, other things. And, just want to make sure that that doesn't classify in this subsection B of section 7. It's a very general, vague point. It says repair, and it was misread in the past in Mojave County. So I just want to make sure that, we're not going to go there again.
Chairman, I can read it for you. It's in the permits exemption from permits, and there is a section of repairs, if I can read it to you. Application or notice to the building official is not required for ordinary repairs to structures, replacement of lamps, or other connection of approved portable electric equipment to approved permanently installed receptacles. Such repair shall not include the cutting away of any wall, partition, or partition thereof, the repair or cutting of any structural beam or load-bearing support, or removal or change of any required means of egress or arrangement of parts of a structure affecting the egress requirements, nor shall ordinary repairs include addition to, alteration of, replacement, or relocation of any water supply, sewer, drainage, drain leader, gas, soil, waste, vent, or similar piping, electrical wiring, or mechanical or other work affected by public health or general safety.
I appreciate if you could add right after repair, C section for detail, because I think that, as I said, definitely was misread in the past. Let me know if there's any other questions so far. On page 10, section 502.1, the address identification. As you all know, in this area, one size fits all does not gonna work for, just the size of the address. If I have a home that is only 15 feet from the property line, a 4-inch would be sufficient. But if it is like in the middle of a 1 acre, even a 6-inch is not going to be enough. So I think there should be a little bit more, regulation on that. That maybe after so many feet, there should be like maybe a small address by the entrance or something to be able to, for the fire department to be able to see. Because if you have, let's say, 5 acre and there's a home there, 6 inches is not going to be enough for the fire department. So I'm thinking that, it needs to show some sort of flexibility for the different homes that we have in different areas of the Mojave County. I don't know what other board members.
Chairman Rosani, if you want, I can read the code. It is a lot more explicit than that.
Okay, well.
So the 18 code reads, address identification. New and existing buildings shall be provided with approved address identification. The address identification shall be legible and placed in a position that is visible from the street or road fronting the property. Address identification characters shall be contrast in their backgrounds. Address numbers shall be arithmetic numbers and alphabetical letters. Numbers shall not be spelled out. Each character shall be a minimum of 4 inches high with a minimum stroke width of ½ inch. Where required by the fire code official, address identification shall be provided in additional approved locations to facilitate emergency response. Where access is by means of a private road or a building address cannot be viewed from the public way, a monument, pole, or other approved sign or means shall be used to identify the structure. Address identification shall be maintained.
Rex, do you have any comments?
No, I was just going to comment that the fire code does already, I know it addresses it in commercial buildings, because I had to size, for instance, on some of the work we've done, the sizing gets bigger the farther you are from the street already.
The code does it, the code has 4-inch letters for both commercial and for residential. Now, there might be private, say, City of Kingman amendments that made those larger for certain things, and/or the fire official can require that. We were just trying to be consistent with what's really getting out there.
And just to be clear, this is on the IBC that you want to change this for
Just
commercial
commercial,
only?
just commercial uses.
The advantage you have is that you have the book. I don't have the book yet. Yeah, we ordered it, Doug McKee and I, we ordered it a while ago, and Amazon hasn't shipped it yet, so.
I was going to put the code sections in under your things, but we would have had a book this thick.
I know. Okay, the next comment was about the plumbing, which we already addressed that, so I assume that you're going to have a better writing on that one.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
On page 12, on section B there, the appendix A, sizing and capacities of gas piping, are you asking that we put that in there?
Yes, so that would be added to the code. So that would be an option for the builders to be able to use that Appendix A as a reference,
So they-
whereas currently it's not.
Yeah,
Option to put it in there to use as a reference, or an option?
it is, it's just a helpful, it's a prescriptive method of sizing the pipe. It's not a requirement, it's a helpful tool that you could use prescriptively to do that. So it's not a code requirement, it's just an aid tool.
Okay, Gilbert, that is, you're talking about the field, right? Or you're talking about the drawings that is going to be submitted?
It would help you with isometric drawings. It would help you size the pipe of any pipes for flow ratings, basically. I'll say gas usually has what's called the longest run method. This just gives you tables and details of how much pressure, what's your drawdown, what's your, fixtures. And it's for commercial. Well, actually, yeah, it could be sized for residential or commercial.
Okay, but you're basically, because I know in commercial that's typical,
It's typical.
so that's common, but for residential, we haven't done that.
No, but if you wanted to size your lines, that would be a tool to use to be able to do that.
But I'm saying that you're not enforcing that, Okay, thank you.
If we're not enforcing it, why do we want it in there?
It's just an aid if you wanted to use it. It doesn't need to be in there.
But if I go turn in a permit and then they say, well, you guys voted on it, we want it in there, is that going to happen? That's my
What
concern.
it is, it's like a span chart. It's
I understand.
Okay, but it's not held to you. It's just a tool for you to use if you want to size your pipes.
Okay, I guess Mr. Hamilton's saying if it is not being enforced and the plan checkers are not going to review, why do we have it here at this time?
We could eliminate, I guess.
Because I read it as appendices adopted.
Yeah.
It says adopted with code, and that's why I'm asking the question.
Gilbert said the right word. He said it would be
We
eliminated.
can remove it. Let me see what
He said it would be eliminated, so that's good.
see, so what the code says, it says updated appendixes lists to reflect the 218 code and addition of new appendixes. And it says appendixes are not part of the code unless specifically adopted. But it goes to, it's a tool. So
That's my
if we're not going to use it, we could take it out.
I would like to take it out, because
Yeah.
you just read it on there, unless specifically adopted, and it reads right here, adopted with code.
Okay?
If we could remove that, please.
I appreciate that, yeah.
Now, the subsection C, or Appendix C, does have actual locations of direct venting. So it has a diagram of where your direct vent is in relationship to windows and open doors. So that one is not a tool. It is a requirement and shows you practical applications for that venting.
On commercial, only on the IBC.
on residential.
On residential, so could you elaborate one more time what you
So
just?
if you have a direct vent furnace, direct vent fireplace, it basically has clearance requirements from windows, open doors. So it gives you a visual in this appendix of where these clearances are required.
Okay, but-
Code calls it out in letter, but this gives you a diagram showing it.
But then if somebody turns in our typical right now permits that we provide, the plan checker would be able to see those, right? The measurements. So there is no need for any additional.
I guess not. It's being plan reviewed for those requirements. This is just a visual for us or them to clarify it, basically.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, question. Yeah, on page 16, you mentioned that, for the detached accessories, which is very common now, everybody goes to Home Depot or Lowe's or Ace and buy one of those shed and drop it in their backyard. So do they have to have a permit now?
Structures under 300 square feet without utilities do not require a permit.
Okay,
We are getting larger structures, and typically they're coming with engineering for some type of hold-down system for uplift or overturn requirements.
so that's what I'm saying, in this particular section, there was no mention about the 300 square feet, so I just want to.
This would apply to structures over 300 square feet.
Right, okay.
Can we back up to page 14 again?
Sure.
This is going to go back to the section R, 106.1.1 on the one lines again. We're talking about amending this section to require plumbing, electrical, and mechanical plans to be a minimum of a single line drawing. We've had some discussion on that, but we haven't really pulled this out or decided to leave it in. And as we left it as this is why we're going to discuss it. So I'd really like to discuss this.
Please.
And I would really like to not have a mechanical plan. I would really like to not have and I'm referring to residential,
Yeah,
a mechanical plan or a plumbing plan. On our site plans, we already put in where the electric comes in, gas comes in, water comes in on our site plans. On our truss counts, it already has, the trusses are already built for the unit, for the air handler that's going in there. And on our floor plans, it already indicates where the compressor is and or where all the attic accesses are. So I don't see a need to have this in here for the mechanical or the plumbing, to be honest.
And Board Member Hamilton, I agree with you, and I agree with Rex Riggi, is if it is an item currently not on there, we could redline that or have that as a correction. It was just, I kind of put it in there as just an aid to help us. But like you said, if we're not sizing the lines, we're not, and things do change in the field as-built wise. I think our biggest one was where was the mechanical unit located and clearances to that. So,
And
but
I understand that, Gilbert. What would end up happening is we end up going to the front desk and we have somebody new up there and says, hey, where's your mechanical drawing? Well, I don't know.
Right.
What they do.
So my recommendation would be to eliminate this section or this
okay,
this amendment
all right,
in its entirety.
thank you.
So we're going to get rid of it completely then, that's the recommendation?
Yep. Yes, sir.
The other thing on that, and just, I think the reason we're wary is, staff does change. And you're sitting here telling us what it means, but the new person might come in and say, well, this is what it means.
Correct. We want to be consistent.
Okay, so we go keep going forward.
That's a good question.
So just for discussion, and I agree, I think as Board Member Rugi explained, and also Board Member Hamilton, for the most part, we get that information on your plans. You're showing us where those things are, and we can catch it early on. One concern might be is for those that aren't showing that information, and we want to, get a little bit more information so we can ensure that we're not going to have a problem later on in the field. Currently, the amendment reads, amend this section to exempt plumbing, electric, and mechanical plans for residential construction. By having that in there, technically, they can say, you don't require that stuff, so no, thank you. And I guess ultimately in the field, if there's an error, that's going to be something that they're going to have to deal with on that end of it. But really, the idea with this is, as Gilbert said, really it started with the mechanical. We had some issues of the placement of the unit, but then also running lines into the garage and breaching that firewall. The firewall. So it was more, not that we want to create a whole bunch more work and all of that. And for the most part, we're getting the information we need. It's just in those situations where we're not being able to be able to redline it and say, hey, this is a correction. We need to know where this unit's being placed. We need to know these things in order to prevent an error in the field. So just, I guess, more for discussion. And definitely there's always that balance of not putting too much in here that can be used as a hammer later, but also having enough in there so that we can do a decent review. So.
Director Welch, the current review that I know of is basically defining it by one small rectangular that they show on the drawings where the location of the HVAC is. Is that correct, Gilbert?
The problem we've been seeing is in the large houses where they have RV garages, is they're wanting to AC the garage. And the problems we've had is they've put the mechanical unit in the house attic area and then breached the firewall into the garage. And again, with no one-line diagram, we can't see that. And the minute we come for our probably drywall or rough combo, we've got ducts all now ducked into everything that's not through the firewall.
You've been doing a great job of, stopping the job and not signing it when it's in the, framing combo. So pretty much, I guess the message was loud and it was received by the community in general. I mean, I'm talking about the, contractors that, they would be able to, I mean, there was some debates on it because it was enforced with, I didn't know much about it until it was confronted with it. But I know that everybody else got to know about that. So I don't think that would be an issue. But again, if they're going to have a separate unit that is going to be in the RV garage, definitely you want that to be shown. And again, your plan checkers are doing a great job saying that, hey, you need to show on the drawing that this is going to be a firewall. And, that's been implemented already in the field. So I just want to make sure that that will reflect the same. If it's okay with the board members. You're okay?
We're good.
Okay, now we're going to go to page 18. That was my beef for quite some time, the GFI in the washer and dryer business. I guess you already addressed that. You already took care of it, but the surprise I had today was studying it, past few days was the dishwasher. So is there any way that we can also take care of the dishwasher? Because dishwasher outlet is always behind there and is not accessible, under the sink away from it. So is that something that we can, because we never had it on a GFI.
We've seen them both ways. We've seen them where the outlet's put behind the unit itself in the wall, and we've seen it where there's a hole through the dividing wall of the sink counter, and the outlet is under the sink, switched to a light. So the one under the sink, that's what they're really addressing. That should be GFI protected.
Okay. So the question that I have is that, that maybe some of the builders, they get to know about it, but in the practical, in a 60-year-old, 70-year-old, 80-year-old, homeowner, when it doesn't work, and, it doesn't take much for the GFI to trip. Most probably, Keith can explain that better than I do. I mean, it does not really make that much, to basically do that. And then, they think that the dishwasher is broke, or, they have to buy a new dishwasher. I mean, that's the mentality. I'm giving you the very honest and straightforward, things like that. I had people, when you decided to have the GFI on the garage doors, I had people calling that, hey, my garage door opener got burned. And, we need to have a new one in there. And, we sent the electrician, it was pushing a button, and everything was fine. So that's how that discussion, came about. So I'm saying, if you want to specify that the dishwasher outlet has to be behind the dishwasher, I can understand that. But, to have a GFI and encouraging a GFI I know we are asking for heartache for not us, for the people, the end users.
And Chairman, we could make a wording of, again, like the washer and dryer plug, inaccessible, or
Thank you.
not readily accessible,
Any other comment on that one?
which would put it behind the unit.
Is that,
I would like to back up a page if we could.
sure?
To 17, if we may. On section M, 1901.3, or that area right there, maybe it's 1502, the identification or the placards or somewhere in that area right there is on appliances. Can you specify that a little bit more for me, Gilbert?
The new dryers are having basically an assisted fan. So the manufacturers are allowed to, or they're actually calling out for larger ducting lengths. The code limits it to 35 feet, but it also, the code says, or manufacturer's instructions. So a normal person servicing that duct or doing something with that duct would be thinking, if it's concealed on the walls, they're not going to be able to know how long that duct is. So, no, that's separate.
19013 is what he's referring to.
Oh, are you talking about stoves or
The 19013?
19013?
Well, yeah, I think, I kind of got lost on some of these deals. It's, the change amendment is no longer needed. Sorry, address. On the cooking appliances or UL standards, manufacturer's installation instructions. I think I'm on this stuff on the instructions
Of appliances.
Okay, yeah, that's a different one.
That's where I'm at. It kind of went from a 15 to a 19 real
Okay.
quick, and I've got scribble everywhere, so.
What I think the 15 and the 12 code basically said, if you had a large hood that had over 400 CFMs, you were required to pull in makeup air into the unit. And their analogy is, you've made the building so tight with the blower door test and everything like that, is you need additional air to come in. And for instance was, I had a friend that put in a larger commercial hood, and they turned it on one Thanksgiving, and it blew logs out of the fireplace. So it sucked so much air. So they say there was a concern there, and actually, I know the city of Kingman was not permitting it, and they had a real problem with the makeup air. What the 18 code did was most of the appliance companies actually addressed that themselves and brought in makeup air to their unit themselves, either kind of like the old wood stoves and the pellet stoves now, how they sucked air from the existing room, but now the new appliances have an output to suck their own air. And they also made a provision in here that air is acceptable to be used from adjoining rooms. So they just didn't limit it to the 400, say you have to have makeup air. They took in effect the rest of the house. So they said it's no longer needed unless the manufacturer calls out for it. So they took
Yeah,
it.
in 2006, there was no provision. In 2012, you needed to have for almost commercial borderline, stove oven, you needed to have like a swamp cooler or something for a makeup, air for it, which would be like the restaurants. And I guess now that is eliminated, because of that.
Just to, try and, I know we've been going through this, but just kind of for clarification as we're going through this, what this is it's a working copy of the code amendments, but this is basically the building code that we had adopted in 12, and Gilbert has gone through and revised that. So for instance, section M 19013 was an amendment that was placed on the 12 code, basically to allow those types of units if they were labeled for household use. What we're proposing right now in this amendment is to get rid of that because those appliances themselves have addressed that concern.
Okay. Where is the GFA?
Gilbert, a point of clarification on that page 19, Appendix Q, Section AQ. I know that it's not applicable in most cases, but I mean, you're talking about the ceiling height, but at the same time talks about like, having a ceiling fan underneath it and all that. So what is the minimum that they can have? Is that 6'4"?
6'4" would be the maximum.
Not to the
minimum
ceiling,
height.
but it has to be to the, whatever is hanging from the ceiling, right?
Correct. They say any obstructions, which would be beams or something, can't encroach into that 6-foot floor.
Okay. Question? Go ahead.
So my question on Q, on Appendix Q, are we adding sections to that? Is Mojave County adding sections to that? Because on the, I did not see them in the code book, 106 through 108.
They're in the back of the
106.
book. The back of the book has the appendixes, yeah. So it's its
That's where I
own,
looked. It only went to 105, I believe. I didn't see 10, and I got the 18. I didn't see, I did not see 106 or 108.
we did do some cut and paste from Coconino County, and so there might be some number changes.
That's what I'm asking. Did Mojave County add those to the code book, or?
Yeah. Let's see. I tried to go through all these and make sure all these numbers are right.
Good catch, Mr. Hamilton. That's awesome.
Catch. Where is key? So. You are correct. Yes, so we are amending to add any section over 104.
Okay, I lost it. What page are you on, Gilbert?
We're on the code book?
Yeah. 7 what?
922 is the appendix Q. But it does.
Yeah, that's correct. It goes section AQ 105 in the code book and ends at AQ 105.1. And then we have it in here, you have the appendix 106, 107, 107.1, 102, all the way to 108.
Correct. Those are amendments that we wish to add to the code.
Is this to make it a little more simpler for tiny houses, if you will, for people to put those up, just out of curiosity?
Definitely simpler because we're reducing some of the clearances, but the original appendix didn't address this. And so I think we kind of copied it from Coconino, saying we want a little bit more clarification and actually let you reduce stuff, but clarify it. Because otherwise you would be stuck with, I'll say like 15 inches from the water closet, you would be stuck with 24 inches if we had to go back to the residential code. So we wanted a little bit more clarification, and that's why we did it.
Okay, and I just wanted to be clear if that's what we did, is added 106 and 108.
We did.
Gilbert, how many permits do you have on this tiny homes?
None right now. We don't recognize tiny homes.
Oh, okay.
So this would be an appendix that actually reduces some of the clearances and some of the requirements of the residential code to allow for a smaller type house.
Got it. John?
Yes, I just had a comment on the dishwasher situation with the GFI. Keep in mind that dishwashers and garbage disposals are both types of motors that are not compatible with GFIs. They're induction motors. And with induction motors, you get a back EMF voltage. You're guaranteed that if you start putting GFIs on the dishwasher and the garbage disposal, they are going to trip all the time. When you come to like a vacuum cleaner, or you come to like a drill motor for the garage and that sort of thing in the house, those have commutators on the motors. And so basically the motor's a DC motor. It doesn't have that problem. But if you start putting the GFIs on the dishwashers and the garbage disposals, it's guaranteed to trip.
I don't believe that the garbage disposal was there, right? So that, okay. Yeah. Okay. Do we have does any of the board members have any other comments? I have my own deal, Gilbert, that I don't see that anywhere It seems like, we solved that issue and we had a decision by the board about the back pour of the garages. And it seems that again, is surfacing, that, they need to have back pour inspection. So I just want to make sure that, we are still in the old decision, not something new.
I'm not sure what the old decision was. We have had discussion on it, and we've had policy discussion on implementation inspection-wise.
So you are right now requiring it?
Yes, we are.
Okay, what's the logic behind that?
That you can't pour that on a monolithic floor.
No, I know, but when they pour, the slab and they pour the stems, on the garage, walls, and then they also, at the same time, they basically do the bond beam that ties the two sides of the garage. That is already inspected.
Some people do that and some people don't do that.
I know. So I'm saying if they do it, there is no need for a back pour inspection, correct? Because the
Theoretically, the slab is not structural, yes.
Right, exactly. It's a back pour, just like a back patio is basically, that's the whole thing.
The only thing that we would be checking would be slope, which is required.
Say it again?
The slope of the garage floor.
Oh, of course, yeah. But again, that would not, that would be, the contractor's responsibility.
We've had, I said both ways. We've had them pour the bond beam, and then we did not require the back pour inspection, and then we've had other contractors not pour the bond beam, and then we don't get a back pour inspection, and we don't get that bond beam inspection. So to stay uniform, we required bond beam, back pour
That's
inspections for
perfect.
everyone.
So what I'm saying is that, if you require the bond beam with the, the stem walls that they are being pouring, then there is no need to that. And again, I'm talking about the field, thing. You're delaying the project because it's very, straightforward when you basically work on that.
I've just instructed the last CBO authorized
Say it again?
that. The last CBO authorized that. The problem we're having is, as I said, some contractors are doing that, some aren't. And if we don't see that bond being poured, that's a major footer that we did not see, and it gets poured without our inspection.
Okay, so you can implement, for the ease of the project that, you want to see the bond beam at the time of the, the stem walls are being poured. And again,
I can't mandate that. That's up to the contractor whether he wants to pour that way or not.
well, in that case, you can, the inspectors can basically, you cannot punish the rest of the, group because of the way that's going.
I understand.
You can,
Chairman Zarmi,
okay.
You're correct in that previously this discussion had come up, and the decision was made that the back pour would not be required. To your point exactly is if that bond beam, and just to make sure we're on the same page here, if the bond beam and those stem walls are all poured together and the back pour is just for the garage floor, then a back pour inspection would not be required, correct?
Correct, but we've had the cases where they won't call back in the back pour, and the bond beam is not there and has not been inspected.
Paul?
How do we notify the contractor that we're on an inspection for footing, but we don't see the back pour? See what I'm saying?
Okay, Paul,
I just wanted to interject.
would you state your name and your address, which is Mojave County?
Hi, Paul Bafford, Golden Valley, Arizona. I am the building inspector senior for Mojave County. I just wanted to interject on this, that when we're out inspecting in the field and the discussions we've had before on these bond beams, is I have written corrections where there's 2 to 3 inches of dirt on top of the bond beam, and then they're pouring the slab on top of that. So we end up with a footing, 3 inches of dirt, and concrete slab. And that's not acceptable to be having dirt in between the footing and the slab. I've informed people on the job that as soon as I get an engineered diagram that shows concrete, dirt, concrete, that would be acceptable.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that we have been looking at, because I know this discussion's gone back and forth the last 2.5 years I've been here.
Right.
And I just wanted to point out that that's one of the things I've been seeing and why we had the bond beam inspection. Thank you.
I appreciate that, but again, I just want to let you know that from the field experience, the top of your bond beam is basically runs into the bottom of the stem, and it does not make sense to have 3 inches of dirt above it because then the garage is not going to be a slope property, because if the garage is 20 feet or 30 feet or 40 feet, it has to have a slope that starts from like about 1.5 inches in the back, or whatever, 1/8 of an inch per foot coming out of the garage. So I think that, what it does is that, you, in field, you pour the next day, when the time is ready to remove the form, they remove the form and they set up the back pour, and the next day they back pour. It basically delays the project, and especially, right now you have enough inspection on your hands. So I'm saying that, instead of policing, I think that we have another contractors that are licensed, bonded, and insured. And if, somebody is faulty of that, I think that, that falls back on the liability on the contractor, not on the Mojave County. So I think that, we need to find a solution to streamline and not to create additional, just like, what we talked about, the walls, we finally got it taken care of, and other issues that we address. I think this is one that is not really necessary, in my opinion.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, sir.
It's Doug McKee speaking of Lovely. I agree with the chairman on the second inspection for the bond beam and board. It's been really difficult for us to schedule not only concrete, but a pump for lots of these jobs. There's a lot of people pouring, only a couple of concrete companies to choose from. Delaying these things another day is a real nightmare for us. I stand with the chairman on keeping it just a regular footing inspection and allowing us to do the back pour.
Mr. Chairman, I might have a solution. I agree with you on the bond beam. If the bond beam's in there, then that's the structural portion of the structure. Our problem is we're coming back and it's not cleaned up for that back pour. And so, but again, it's not a structural item. The problem we do have is some people don't pour that back pour. Now, there could be something where on our footing inspection, if we don't see that bond beam formed in, well, we wouldn't see it. It wouldn't. My problem is it wouldn't be formed. It's formed in typically, and then they move the forms for the truck to pull all the way back, and then they don't pour that section. We would never see it until we come back for a bond beam inspection.
They don't back into the garage. They go to the side of the garage.
Not everyone.
I'm just saying that, again, since the bond beam is already poured, and that's part of the inspection that you have already signed off, again, it goes back to the policing instead of enforcing. I mean, in Lake Havasu City, there was a builder 30 years ago that right after the inspection, he would remove all the rebars and take it to another, footing. Where was the inspector there? Wasn't there. And it wasn't their job to be there. He is no longer here. He went to jail and he's gone. That's why I'm talking about it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I really, really hate to interrupt on inspection stuff, I promise you.
Sure, no, that's
But I think our case in point right now is the adoption of the 2018 code. We could probably throw that in as new business after we get the 18 code discussed. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, this is part of the code, because this is basically what we were talking about. They have to be part of the code also, because they have to be implemented for the inspection.
Well, I agree with the inspections, but I think we're on the adoption of the 18 code.
Yeah, there's absolutely nothing about, the garage and the bond beam and all that in there, so.
And they usually pour this.
I just want to make sure that, we talked about, the GFI and the, all that, so I want to make sure that we bring it out. That's the only item I have on my list.
A day later.
Any other comment or anything? Right?
I do have one more comment, and it goes back to page 10. If you can provide a little bit more clarity when you're talking about labeling the firewalls, fire barriers, smoke barriers, and partitions. First of all, what, firewalls, a lot of different things. It's 20-minute between a garage and a house. It's a 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour. Are you requiring that for all of those? And what would constitute labeling in your eyes?
Commercial. Typically, this would be based for commercial, for full fire-rated assemblies. So in residential, you typically don't have that. You just have separation from the garage to the structure.
So could we maybe add commercial in there?
I believe it is in the commercial IBC section.
Oh, is that that's in the IBC and not the IRC, then I apologize, that's...
Are you looking at 703.7? 703.7, that is in the commercial IBC.
That's in commercial, okay. Yeah. Yep. All right.
Now there is there might not be cases now. There was cases where we had to separate the garage, again, in the last code at 3,000 square feet, and that becomes a 2-hour firewall. So
Okay.
in one essence, that would apply to this, of saying that is
Okay.
a rated assembly that somebody should know about. But now that we've taken
All right.
that limit out of the residential code, you're not going to have that anymore.
All right. And then is labeling defined somewhere in the code as to what constitutes labeling?
It does go into size of labeling, size of numbers, and what should be listed on it, yeah.
Okay. Do we have any other comments? So Gilbert and Director Walsh, I guess the next item would be basically going into March for, you're going to final draft this. And would you be able to send it to us via email so we would be able to review it ahead of the meeting?
Absolutely. Chairman Azarmi, what we will do, basically, the next step in this would be to take the comments that we've received today, incorporate those into this ordinance, update the ordinance based on the input we've received today, bring this back to the board in March for your consideration, and as well as any additional amendments that you'd like to add, any additional changes that you'd like to see. And then the intent being at that March meeting to make a recommendation that would then go to the Planning and Zoning Commission for their consideration.
Okay. Any comments? If you have any other comment from John, Larry?
Sorry, Chairman, just to add to that, to answer your question, we'll definitely get it out at least. I'm going to put the pressure on Patty. We'll get it out to you at least 2 weeks before the March
I
meeting. That way
appreciate
you've got time.
Thank you. Thank you. Larry?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just make one more comment. Some point in some time, somebody needs to consider the economic impact of your actions. Very idea that that's never consideration is the reason we don't have affordable housing. Somebody at some point in time has got to take that under consideration. And you heard here today, nobody ever cares. You need to care. People out here can't afford all of this nonsense. You've looked at a lot of stuff today. You can intelligently begin to deal with a quarter of it. What they say are the major changes in here are about that much of thousands of changes, and there isn't a man alive knows the impact of this action. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything else, Gilbert? Director Walsh?
Just to add that you did get all the significant changes of the IRC for review. And actually, in my opinion, is there is quite a bit of good changes in the 18 code. They've actually defined out a lot more tables and a lot more different methods and materials that you could use, which I believe helps out the builder.
And I assume that you read cover to cover about the whole thing, right? Or is it like, these comments that you basically have, is it from the code people send it to you, or you also,
I pretty much looked through.
You
all the
looked into it,
sections.
right?
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
With a lot of help. I mean, there's.
Appreciate that. Okay. Ms. Hamilton?
Isn't there a website of sorts that will tell us exactly every single change from 12 or 15 to 18 in the IBC and IRC?
No.
The problem we have is from one code change, yes. So in essence, but from the 12 code to the 18 code, there is a significant change book out for the 12 to the 15, and then there's one from the 15 to the 18. When we went to the 12 code, a lot of people went from the 6 code to the 12 code, so it was a double code change. And they did put out a book of all the significant changes between the two code sections in one book. They didn't do that in this case in the 18 book.
Isn't that the one you have right now?
We have the residential one.
Yeah, the residential, we have that, and that's the one, that was sent to you by me.
Yeah, and there is a building code one too. So, and like I said, I went through both those books and picked out what I felt was significant and either financial or significant hardship on a builder. And that's what our meetings were held on that. But again, you guys did get the full significant changes from the code.
Are we done? So please, someone make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion.
I second.
We have a second from a space. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, any nays? Motion carries. Thank you.
Guys.
Doug McKee.
Has left the conference.